Chapter 60. Gong Emo analyzed the situation one by one. In the beginning, even with father's full support, because of the need to recruit laborers and corvées, everyone will think that every step will be difficult. But if we use my method, after a year, they will become alert and ponder the benefits. Those who hear the news will definitely want a piece of the pie. When that time comes, even if the ministers don't stop us for the sake of their children, it's hard to say what the princes will do. She didn't speak quickly, but her words were clear and logical, and every word hit the nail on the head. Instead of waiting for others to come, it's better to share it with Gong Dai. This is one of the conditions for my full support. He clearly knew that Gong Dai's help was better than those greedy wolves, but Gong Che couldn't suppress the jealousy in his heart. I'm afraid father won't agree. He was the crown prince and represented the emperor to dig the canal. In the hearts of the people, it was equivalent to the emperor himself. But Gong Dai didn't have anything. Even if someone wanted to get a share in the future, how could Gong Dai compete with them? Gong Emo smiled confidently. He was taught by me. I know what he is capable of. As long as he perfectly and quickly completes the canal work in Shizhou that others can't complete in 6 or 7 years, he will definitely be able to compete with those people with his flood control experience. If he couldn't even compete with those people, he wouldn't be the frightening regent in the future. Gong Che, on the other hand, was even more depressed. He felt that as an elder brother, he should smile at this time. After all, Gong Emo had pointed out a way out for him. He should be grateful, so he should be happy and magnanimously express his willingness to accept. But when he thought that Gong Emo couldn't forget Gong Dai and was always on his side, Gong Che couldn't help but feel a trace of unwillingness in his heart. Wasn't it just 3 years of mutual help in the cold palace? Why couldn't he compete? Gong Emo naturally didn't know what Gong Che was thinking. Seeing him deep in thought, she thought he was considering the details. Her purpose was naturally more than that. Her little head was spinning fast. All the rules and regulations were laid out one by one. The pros and cons were clear at a glance. First of all, Gong Che would definitely benefit a lot from this matter. After all, Gong Che's maternal family, the Liu family, was also in the south. They were also a large aristocratic family. Once they left the capital, the power of these large families would be displayed. With the help of the Liu family, once the communication between the north and south was established, the emperor's regional power would be strengthened. If the emperor was happy, he would definitely let the Liu family be his acting vassal. Not to mention, once the communication between the north and south was established, the Liu family would be able to gain a lot of benefits through the canal. Moreover, the children of those ministers followed Gong Che. Although they didn't know anything, they had a high status and had been polished several times. They were also of help to Gong Che. This was only a benefit for Gong Che. What about herself? Gong Emo's eyes flashed, and the corner of his mouth involuntarily revealed a victorious smile. She was the one who had the earliest advantage and the one who had the most right to speak. The shops in her hands were only in the capital and could no longer satisfy her needs. If she could follow the canal and expand her business all the way to the south, it wouldn't be impossible. Most importantly, she could use Gong Che's merit in opening the canal to ask the emperor for the right to transport goods before anyone could react. Even if she couldn't monopolize it, her trading fleet would have to be legal. If the Grand Canal was filled with her trading ships, she didn't dare to think about the benefits behind it. Water could make money. As long as she had the right to speak, then whether it was transporting goods, carrying passengers, or even smuggling, she would be able to gain a large portion of the benefits. Gong Emo thought of this and slowly sighed. Finally, she smiled, revealing her pure white teeth. She had never been a person who killed 2 birds with 1 arrow. What she wanted was to kill more with 1 arrow, the more the better. When Gong Che hurriedly went to see the Empress early in the morning and persuaded the Empress to hand over the phoenix seal to cultivate, unexpectedly, the Empress did not shout to stop him. Instead, she was terrifyingly silent. Gong Che originally had his head down, but seeing that his mother didn't speak for a long time, he raised his head to look. Who would have thought that when he looked, she was actually crying? 2 lines of tears silently fell. Her eyes were sad, but she didn't make a single sound. Mother. He walked a few steps forward and carefully wiped away her tears. However, the Empress' tears were like a broken string of pearls that kept falling. In just a short month, she seemed to have aged a dozen years. Her mind had also become weak and gentle. She was no longer as elegant as she had been in the past. The Empress grabbed Gong Che's hand and raised her head to speak with tears in her eyes. Son, don't worry. Mother will do as you say. Only son. Are you really going to give up like this? She had thought that Gong Che asking to repair the canal that might not be finished in 5 or 6 years was because he was disheartened and had already given up on the fight for the throne. Gong Che couldn't help laughing. Thus, he lowered his head and repeated Gong Yimo's words to the Empress. Originally, if his mother knew about this, she would definitely ask if Gong Yimo was really confident, or if she had a way to build the canal so quickly, and so on. Who would have thought that after hearing Gong Che's words, the Empress' eyes would light up? She grabbed Gong Che's hand and anxiously said, Are you serious? Did Chaoyang Princess really say all of this? Gong Che nodded and said yes. The Empress suddenly laughed loudly. The Empress' laughter made the palace maids guarding the palace gate feel a wave of fear in their hearts. The Empress. Did she finally go crazy because of the continuous blows? Then what should they do? Even Gong Che was a bit afraid. He patted the Empress' shoulder, but he saw the Empress suddenly raise her head to look at him. That gaze made his heart tremble. Good. Good, good. She said good 3 times in a row. If everything Gong Yimo said was true, then when his son returned, there would be no need to worry about not having a chance to turn things around. That would be a great achievement. Good. Good. At this time, the Empress was indeed a bit muddle-headed because of the ups and downs, but she still firmly held her son's hand and her face regained its spirit once again. If there was such a good opportunity after leaving the capital, then the Crown Prince's unique privilege of participating in politics was not a rare thing. If all of this is what Chaoyang Princess said, then do it. Son. Mother believes in you. Mother will wait for your return at the sacred Buddha temple. Gong Che felt that it was very strange. He didn't understand why his mother trusted Gong Yimo more than him. Mother, are you not afraid that I will completely lose my power after leaving the capital? The Empress shook her head. Her phoenix eyes once again lit up as she calculated. Although Mother has gone to the temple, the Lu family is still here. Mother will protect the capital for you. Also, since this is what Chaoyang Princess wants, since she said it, she will definitely do it. Saying this, her expression was dignified and she sighed as if a heavy burden had been lifted off her shoulders. That Gong Yimo. She has a benevolent heart and also has the attitude of a hero. She is not an ordinary woman. Son, Mother was blind before. Chapter 61. After all, the Empress was 40 years old. She had seen so many people and things. Now that she had experienced so many ups and downs, she was very good at judging people. She said that Gong Yimo was an ambitious woman because although she was benevolent, she was able to kill an assassin at the age of 10. Although she looked harmless, she was full of schemes. She had ambition and dared to put it into practice. If she wasn't an ambitious woman, what was she? When Gong Che heard the Empress' high praise, Gong Che was shocked, but he wasn't dissatisfied at all. He was very happy that his Empress mother approved of him. Don't mention the past anymore. Imperial sister won't mind. When Gong Che thought of Gong Yimo, for some reason, his face became very gentle. Imperial sister, she is indeed a powerful and broad-minded person. When the Empress saw him like this, she didn't know why, but she felt a little uneasy. She hesitated. After a while, she opened her mouth. Son, do you have feelings for that Gong Yimo? She didn't say the last 4 words. She just looked at Gong Che with a thoughtful expression. When Gong Che came back to his senses, he heard, "Hm. Imperial Mother, what did you just say?" Looking at the gentle and confident glow on her son's handsome face, the Empress shook her head evasively. Nothing, there's no time to lose. Imperial Mother will go see your Imperial Father now. It's just that. She looked at Gong Che and wanted to say something, but stopped. It's just that, that's your sister. Even if they aren't related by blood, this is a crime against the world. But she didn't say it. Now that they were in a precarious situation, why should she say it? Thinking that he wouldn't be able to see the Empress for a long time, Gong Che stayed with her and said a few more words before finally leaving. The moment he stepped out of Feng Chi Palace, Gong Che looked at the blue sky and white clouds. His heart suddenly filled with infinite joy. He was going to leave. He was going to build his own business and break through this world. Gong Che looked in the direction of Zhao Yang Hall and smiled slightly. When he came back, he would no longer be controlled by others. The weather in the capital had always been dry and sunny. Sure enough, the next day, when Gong Che proposed to leave the capital to build a canal, the court was in an uproar. Everyone looked at him with a strange gaze. Had the crown prince gone crazy from all the provocations he had received today? One must know that the crown prince's only privilege was to govern the country on behalf of the emperor. How could he give up such a good opportunity to build a canal? And according to the crown prince's plan. Moreover, it was indeed marvelous. The benefits it could bring were innumerable. Once it was completed, it would be a great achievement. But who knew how many years it? 8. At that time, everything would be settled. What would be the point of all these achievements? Using such a method to increase one's political achievements was simply too foolish. Therefore, under such strange gazes, not a single official stood out to refute. Gong Che stood below the imperial court with his back ramrod straight. He ignored those gazes and faced the emperor directly. Gong Cheng's fingers tapped on the dragon throne as he pondered. Yesterday, the empress sent someone to hand over the phoenix seal. She said she would enter the temple to pray for the people. But here, his son proposed to leave the capital to control the flood and build a canal. In the eyes of outsiders, the crown prince was already muddling along and was disheartened, so he accepted the order to leave the capital. However, he was able to pull himself together in such a short period of time, stand here in high spirits, and make such a decision. Gong Qing felt that his son had not collapsed. He just didn't know why he wanted to build a canal. It was indeed too long. Gong Che was chilled by the emperor's stare. Did Imperial Father see something? Gong Che's mind was full of thoughts. His spirit was highly concentrated. This is a good thing. The emperor suddenly laughed and praised in a voice as loud as a bell. That's a wonderful idea. Although the project is vast, it will be a good thing for the country and the people if it is really built. Looks like he agreed. Gong Che heaved a sigh of relief. Gong Qing stared at him without blinking. Being stared at by the emperor like this, Gong Che's heart was raised again. This matter, Jin will fully support it. No matter how long it takes to build it, Jin will undertake it. But... Che, do you really want to take this task? Gong Che took a deep breath. At this time, his eyebrows were gentle and calm. The elegance that belonged to the crown prince once again appeared on his body. This son is willing to accept the order. If the canal is not built, this son will not return to the capital. His determination made the ministers gasp. The crown prince must be crazy. He was stimulated to the point of madness. Gong Cheng was also very surprised. He leaned forward in his dragon throne as if he wanted to see through the other side. This matter is hard and heavy. Che, do you have any requests? Gong Che slowly exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. He raised his head and said the prepared script. This son has 3 requests. Oh. For this child who has always been very gentle, this is the first time he is so strong. Gong Cheng waved his hand, there's no harm in saying it. Gong Che smiled slightly. First, this son will be gone for many years. I hope that Imperial Father can look after Imperial Mother for returning the Phoenix Seal. Your filial piety is commendable. Shen will allow it. Gong Che's eyes brightened, and he smiled again. Second, this son hopes that no matter how long this son will cultivate, Imperial Father will not send another person to take charge. This matter can only be handled by this son. This made Gong Cheng a little strange. Is there anyone who wants to compete with him for the right to take charge? He smiled, this matter is huge. I'm afraid your energy will be limited. Gong Che smiled gently, that's the 3rd request. Because this matter is huge, this son wants the ministers to send their talented children. First, it's to train the talents for our Daiyu state. Second, they can be used by me. I hope Imperial Father will grant these 3 requests. Gong Cheng's eyes flashed. He pondered for a moment and then leaned back on the dragon throne and looked down at the ministers. Does anyone have any objections? All the ministers looked at each other. What can they do about this kind of good thing? They don't have much, but they have a lot of sons. When the time comes, they can send a favored child who has no official position. When he comes back, he will be promoted. As for whether the child sent is talented or not, this is not something the crown prince can decide. Therefore, for a moment, all the ministers nodded and praised the crown prince for his benevolence and thoughtfulness. Gong Cheng looked down at the court. It's been a long time since he saw such a happy scene. Some time ago, they were like aggressive roosters who fought until their eyes turned red. Now that they finally forced the main character out of the capital, they must be very proud, right? Gong Che just looked at them and smiled at these praises without saying anything. A month ago, these people forced his grandfather to bleed on the spot. Now, they are praising him for his filial piety. This is the imperial court awe. He tried to make himself smile benevolently and gently. He should have been used to this kind of imperial court long ago. He couldn't help but think of Gong Yimo. She was the only one who sincerely thought for him. She gave him advice and thought about everything. Gong Che's heart warmed, and he suddenly wanted to go home. Chapter 62. But after the court, he was stopped by the emperor. Shaoyang Palace Hall. This was the place where the emperor read the memorials. The entire room was made of Phoebe Jinan wood. As soon as one entered, the strong scent of the wood calmed one's heart. Gong Cheng was still high and mighty. He looked at his son. A few days ago, his face was pale and he left in despair. Today, he could regain his confidence in the court and speak with assurance. As the saying goes, without destruction, there can be no construction. He seemed to have transcended his past self and displayed a different style that was unique to him. Gong Xing rubbed his chin. He believed that he was the one who had destroyed Gong Che, but he didn't know who it was that had built him. Being stared at by the emperor like this, although Gong Che was a little nervous, he stood there calmly. His face was like jade and his expression was gentle. Anyone who saw him would think that if he succeeded the throne, he would be a benevolent emperor. Who gave you the idea? After a long time, Gong Qing slowly asked. As soon as he opened his mouth, Gong Che was stunned for a moment and said, "This son met a counselor by chance. Unfortunately, we only met once." Counselor? Gong Che smiled. He was not the kind of person to beat around the bush. It was Immerse. He said it with certainty and used a statement. Gong Che did not answer, which meant that he admitted it. Gong Qing sighed. His expression was both bitter and helpless. Ah, that little girl. Gong Che was afraid that Gong Yimo had touched the emperor's sensitive nerve and quickly said, "Yimo just wanted to help me and contribute to the world. I hope Imperial Father will not blame her." "If you want me to not blame you, that's fine." He smiled slyly and said, "She let you leave the capital and build the canal. These are all good ideas. But the canal has been built for many years. That girl is smart, so she definitely knows about it." "Then what did she say to make you agree?" And the Empress also agreed. Gong Che pondered for a moment. He couldn't say, no, he should say that he didn't know what to do. Seeing Gong Che's silence, Gong Qing shook his head helplessly. His sons, one by one, were led by the nose by that little girl. Sometimes, even he was also in that girl's calculations. That girl was really too shrewd. She clearly knew that Gong Che would ask about it, and Gong Che wouldn't be able to hide it, so she deliberately didn't tell Gong Che. But no matter what, it was a good thing for the country and the people. Gong Qing sighed, stood up, and walked straight to Gong Che's side. The 16-year-old Gong Che was about the same height as him. He was handsome and not as muscular as him, but he was a good boy who could take responsibility. Looking at Gong Che, who was growing up day by day and gradually revealing his sharpness, Gong Cheng's eyebrows relaxed for a moment. He patted Gong Che's shoulder. "Since you want to go, Imperial Father will certainly support you. I hope you can come back soon." Seeing that the emperor no longer asked, Gong Che finally breathed a sigh of relief. Looking at his imperial father, who was still tall and straight, he found that there were gray hairs on his temples. Gong Che's heart ached, but he didn't know what he was sad about. Probably, this was the bond of blood thicker than water. This matter was settled without anyone stopping it. However, the transfer orders of various aspects, the finalization of personnel, the gathering of craftsmen, and the preparation of funds all required time. As a result, Gong Che was very busy during this period of time and was almost nowhere to be seen. At this time, Gong Yimo was sitting in the courtyard drinking tea, enjoying snacks and wine in the wisteria pavilion. She was comfortably enjoying life. Suddenly, there was a rustling sound. She looked at the wall and saw a hand climbing on it. Soon, a head popped out. Seeing the person, Gong Yimo giggled, "Aw. Isn't this the heir apparent? Why don't you go through the front door and climb the wall instead? Keep your voice down." Shen Shiyi looked around. Seeing that no one was around, he flipped over. "Isn't it because of that brother of yours? He's simply crazy. He doesn't allow anyone to come find you. Otherwise, this young master wouldn't need to climb the wall." Gong Yimo didn't think that there would be such a thing. Shen Shiyi walked over and glanced at her. "Oh, you're having a good life. This sweetheart cake and snow cloud cake are famous in the city. You can't buy them even if you line up, but you have a lot of them here." As he spoke, he didn't treat himself as an outsider and began to eat. Gong Yimo smiled as she sized him up. "Aren't you afraid that there's poison in it?" Shen Shiyi choked. Suddenly, he didn't know whether to swallow or spit it out. He stared at her and couldn't speak clearly. what are you saying? Gong Yimo propped up her chin and laughed. Idiot, I haven't seen you for a while. How come you've become even more idiotic? Shen Shiyi was burning with anger. He swallowed the dessert and glared at her. Who are you calling idiotic? Ugly woman. Do you want to die? Enough. Gong Yimo wasn't afraid at all. Instead, she waved her hand. Tell me, what are you doing here? Shen Shiyi angrily suppressed his anger. He didn't forget the fact that he couldn't beat this person. It's Yu Ziqing and his gang. You saw them last time when we were drinking. They wanted to go out with you to play, but they were stopped at the door. That's why this young master came in to find out what's going on. Thinking about those youths she saw last time, Gong Yimo's mind spun. After a moment, she blinked and quickly stood up. Is there really something fun? Hurry up and lead the way. If it's not fun, I won't forgive you. Shen Shiyi suddenly glanced at her with a smile that wasn't a smile. Don't worry. It's guaranteed to be fun. The street was filled with guests. Gong Yimo squinted her eyes as she sized up the carvings on the door. The carvings were exquisite and complicated. The craftsmanship of the master who built the house was really good. Shen Shiyi couldn't help but pull her. Let's go. What's there to look at the door? Gong Yimo glanced at him. If I don't look at the door, should I look at them? As she spoke, she pointed at the two courtesans who wanted to approach, but didn't dare to because of Lord Shizi's abuse of power. At this time, the procuress heard that Lord Shizi had arrived and quickly came out to welcome him. Oh, Lord Shizi. You haven't been here for a long time. Hurry up and come in. Your friends are waiting for you in the private room. As she spoke, she saw Gong Yimo and her eyes flashed. Oh, look at this cute little gentleman. Is he Lord Shizi's younger brother? Originally, she thought that the other party looked rather feminine, but the other party's eyes revealed a sense of disdain for no reason. It wasn't something an ordinary noble would have. The procuress's heart trembled. She felt that this little gentleman's background wasn't small. Shen Shiyi pulled Gong Yimo behind him. Don't talk too much. Why aren't you leading the way? Hey! Yes, yes. Please come in, please come in. The brothel keeper's eyes narrowed with a smile as she hurriedly welcomed them in. In her previous life, Gong Yimo was already tired of visiting brothels. At that time, she was a frequent customer of brothels because this kind of place was the most suitable for banquets and discussions. At this time, the people in the private room were getting anxious. Why isn't he here yet? Could it be that Lord Shizi was also stopped? Yu Ziqing frowned slightly, but Su Yuan wasn't anxious at all. Don't worry. There's no one that Lord Shizi can't invite. Chapter 63. Li Ku, on the other hand, sat to the side and quietly sipped his tea. He was different from these domineering young men. As an editor of the Hanlin Academy, he had used his own abilities to reach his current position. The only reason they were gathered together today was because they had drunk together once before. The rather plump young master beside him tugged at Li Ku's hand and pointed at the jade butterfly cake in front of him. Big brother Li, do you want some? If you don't, I'll finish it all. Li Ku glanced at him and said with a smile, Qing Qing, you really can't eat anymore. It's almost lunchtime. Hearing this, the little fatty looked at the last piece of jade butterfly cake on the plate with some reluctance. He didn't know if he was trying to convince Li Ku or himself. In any case, I've already eaten so much. One more piece won't make a difference. Li Ku shook his head with a wry smile. At this moment, there was a knock on the door. Those who were originally sitting all stood up. Sure enough, when they opened the door, they saw Gong Yimo dressed as a man. At this moment, Gong Yimo was wearing a moon-white man's robe with a small jade crown. Her small face was fair and tender, and her small lips were bright red. She really looked like the pampered eldest son of a large family. At this moment, she gestured to everyone and giggled. Shaoxing Gong Yimo greets all my older brothers. Her actions caused the nervousness of the people present to recede. Li Kun narrowed his eyes and sized her up before saying, "Only now do I know that the princess is even more imposing in men's clothing. Truly, women don't lose out to men." Gong Yimo waved her hand and greeted them one by one. Then she said, "Let's not make empty promises. The heir said that he brought me out to have fun. If it's not fun, I'll hold you guys responsible." When she said this, the youths looked at each other. Su Yuan rubbed his chin and said, "If it were any other day, I wouldn't dare to say this. But today, the princess really came at the right time." Yu Ziqing smiled mysteriously. "In our capital, there is the #1 beauty in the capital. But among the common people, there is also the #1 beauty in the world. She traveled here with the carriages, and today is the first time she is on stage in the capital. Many people have come because of her reputation." Hearing his words, Gong Yimo was a little curious. In her previous life, she had never heard of this person in the capital. She did not know what he looked like to be worthy of being called #1 in the world. That's a matter for tonight. Let's talk about business now. Yu Ziqing gave the others a look, and they all sat down. Smelling the fragrant Snow Mountain sprout tea in front of her, Gong Yimo narrowed her eyes as if intoxicated. However, she saw that the others were all looking at her, not knowing what to say. Little Fatty, on the other hand, picked up the last piece of pastry and gnawed on it. He mumbled, "Look at how scared you guys are. Let me tell you. Chaoyang Princess, we have already discussed it. We will follow you, follow the Crown Prince to open the canal." Gong Yimo was slightly taken aback. It turned out that when they found out about this a few days ago, their clans had already made a decision. They were all capable older brothers with high status, but they were idle second-generation officials. Originally, they were not interested in this matter, but their clans forced them to go, so they had no choice. However, later on, they found out that this matter was proposed by the Crown Prince, and Gong Yimo was now following the Crown Prince. Naturally, wherever the Crown Prince went, she would follow. When they thought about how they could follow Gong Yimo to the south to eat and drink, it did not seem like a bad thing. There was a limited number of places for this trip. Originally, they did not want to take it, but when they heard this, they changed their minds. After discussing it, they invited her to go through the back door together. Gong Yimo laughed inwardly as they thought of the same thing. It was really effortless for them to come, however, on the surface, there was a slight hesitation. "This trip is long and will take a long time. Are you guys sure about this?" The few of them had clearly discussed it and nodded. Gong Yimo frowned slightly and said, "Then if you guys go, what can you do?" Her words stunned the others. Originally, their clans had said that there was an absolutely good job for them. They only needed to go out for a trip, eat, drink and have fun everywhere, and when they came back, they would be promoted. Now that Gong Yimo asked them what they could do, everyone present was stunned. Other than eating, drinking and having fun, they really did not know what else they could do. At this time, only Li Ku said, "I'm now a member of the Hanlin Academy, and I'm majoring in geology. Therefore, I've read a lot of books in this area. I should be able to help in finding water sources and digging angles." Gong Yimo nodded and looked at them again. After being glanced at by Gong Yimo, the rest of them felt ashamed. However, no matter how hard they tried, they did not know what they could do. Seeing their nervous expressions, Gong Yimo suddenly burst out laughing. "Don't tell me your clans all asked you to go out and have fun." Her words made them even more embarrassed. They were really prepared to go out and have fun. At this moment, little fatty Chin Chin looked at Gong Yimo blankly and said, I only know how to eat, but I'm also very obedient. As long as I'm given good food, I'll do anything. His words enlightened the other two. That's right, that's right. We're all very obedient. If there's anything we can do for you, just let us know. What do you think, is this okay? Gong Yimo blinked as if she was thinking. You'll be obedient, the few of them nodded furiously. Their neat and adorable appearance made Gong Yimo unable to hold it in. All right. It's you guys then. Who asked us to drink together before? Her words made the few of them very happy. At this moment, Gong Yimo looked at Shen Shiyi. What about you? Are you willing to go with me? Shen Shiyi did not speak from the start, looking as if he had something on his mind. When he heard Gong Yimo's question, he lowered his eyes and shook his head. Gong Yimo laughed. She had misspoken. As the heir, how could Shen Shiyi follow them to dig a canal that no one knew how long it would take to complete? Thus, she skipped over this topic. Soon, the sky turned dark and the building gradually became lively. It became difficult to find a seat as there were heads everywhere. Gong Yimo looked at the crowd on the first floor from the second floor and could not help but laugh. How enthusiastic! I wonder how beautiful the world's #1 beauty is. Compared to our capital's #1 beauty, how is she better? Bright lights clustered around the stage in the middle of the first floor. The #1 beauty would appear there in a moment. Soon, the atmosphere became more and more lively amidst the clamor of the crowd. The procuress walked up the stage at this moment. Ignoring the boos of the crowd, she smiled charmingly. I know that everyone doesn't want to see me, but I'm here to pass on a message from the world's #1 beauty. Her words caused an enthusiastic response from the crowd. Quickly call her out. I can't wait. What did the young lady say? Just say it. Seeing the crowd's enthusiastic response, the procuress covered her mouth and laughed. It's nothing much. The young lady came from afar and saw the prosperity of the capital. With so many officials supporting her, the young lady is quite embarrassed. So, the young lady wants to invite the youngest official here to play a song with her to boost her courage. I hope everyone will be magnanimous enough to forgive. Chapter 64. Her words elicited the most enthusiastic response from the crowd. They directly ignored the word youngest and volunteered one after another. There were even people who shouted. What's so interesting about a young master? Or is it that only men like us can satisfy the ladies? Did you, the brothel keeper, pass the wrong message? The brothel keeper was not anxious. She covered her mouth and laughed. Miss Jingyun is from a brothel. It's her first time appearing in the capital, so she's inevitably a little timid. Naturally, she's looking for a young master. But most of the people who come to brothels are adults. No matter how young he is, how young can he be? Who says there isn't? Aren't I very young? A lazy voice sounded. It was obviously young, but it suppressed all the noise and rang in everyone's ears. Ignoring the youths behind her who were beating their chests and stamping their feet to dissuade her, Gong Yimo leaned on the carved railing and looked down. That lazy and sloppy look really gave off a domineering feeling. Everyone looked up. Oh, there really was a young master who looked no more than 10 years old. He looked like he was carved from jade. Although he did not stand properly, his aura was there. One could tell at a glance that he was a young master from a prominent family. However, the people present were either rich or respectable. Someone immediately looked up and shouted at her, "Why are you visiting a brothel at such a young age? Look at you, I'm afraid you haven't weaned yet, right?" His words caused a roar of laughter. Gong Yimo dug her ears, wrinkled her little nose, and harumphed. How do you know that I haven't weaned yet? Today, I'm going for the young lady's chest. She spoke vulgarities at such a young age, giving off a huge sense of incongruity. Someone was overjoyed. Look at how arrogant he is. It's probably because he's too short that he only reaches her chest. Gong Yimo was not convinced by his words. I think you people are obviously jealous. She looked up again and said to the brothel keeper, why aren't you calling Miss Jingyun out? I've accepted the invitation. The brothel keeper narrowed her eyes and sized her up. She nodded repeatedly. I. This old one will go and invite her out now. The faint sound of the pipa suddenly became louder. Hearing that the beauty was about to appear, everyone stopped talking and stared at the stage. Their emotions were ignited to the highest point. Shen Shiyi poked Gong Yimo's head and said resentfully, they're clearly targeting you. Why do you insist on going? Gong Yimo was caught off guard and stumbled from his poke. She glared at him. Shen Shiyi, how dare you? Why don't you try again? Shen Shiyi immediately withered. He swept his eyes over the other youths. The other youths all lowered their heads and pretended not to see anything. Isn't it because I'm afraid that you'll fall into someone else's trap? If there's any mishap, your crown prince brother will definitely find trouble with me. Gong Yimo glanced at him. Her gaze was very clear, as if to say, if you care about me, just say it. You're just a little tyrant, why are you afraid of him? Shen Shiyi felt very awkward under her gaze. Just as he was about to get angry, a burst of exclamations came from below the stage. It must be that famous Miss Jingyun who had appeared, right? Gong Yimo hurriedly leaned over to take a look. She saw 4 women draped in red muslin coming out like fish. Each of them had stunning looks and enchanting figures. They danced to the increasingly passionate sound of the pipa. The red muslin fluttered, stunning everyone. But which one was Miss Jingyun? Gong Yimo rubbed her chin. At this moment, the brothel keeper suddenly came up the stage and smiled. Young master, please come down. Miss Jingyun hopes that you can lead her out. The brothel keeper's words caused another burst of exclamations from below the stage. If these beautiful women were not Jingyun, then how beautiful would Jingyun be? Interesting. Gong Yimo smiled. She suddenly slapped the railing in front of her and flipped over. Amidst the exclamations of the people below, she flew through the air and landed on the stage, scaring away the 4 maidservants who were originally dancing. Once she stepped off the stage, she was the only one left. It turned out that this young master was also a martial arts expert. Many people cheered in the spirit of watching a good show. Gong Yimo waved her hand. After everyone quieted down, she revealed a smile. With a snap, she opened the folding fan that she had taken from Li Ku's table. She was very flirtatious and very arrogant. Miss Jingyun, right? This young man is here. Are you ready? She smiled wickedly. However, because of her red lips and white teeth, her naughty smile did not look lewd. Instead, it was very cute. As she spoke, she walked to the center of the stage and slightly bent down. She stretched out her hand and gave a gentleman's salute. Everyone held their breaths and stared at her. They wanted to see what this world-famous beauty looked like. Slowly, the sound of the pipa faded away. When it was quiet, the gentle melody of the guzheng sounded. At this moment, a woman's delicate laughter sounded. Before they saw her, they could hear her voice. Such a beautiful voice was like pearls and jade falling on a plate, causing people's hearts to itch unbearably. Jingyun is indebted to everyone for your support. It's my honor. It was clearly a few simple words, but to her, it was charming to the bone. Gong Yimo slightly narrowed her eyes. Did this person practice some kind of charm? Very quickly, she did not have the mood to think about these trivial things. Because the back of her hand sank. A hand gently covered it, everyone present was quiet. It was clearly only a hand, but it was white and slender. The knuckles were slender and well-proportioned. It was said that the hand was a woman's second face. They wondered if her face was also so perfect. Hee, I'll have to trouble this young master. Gong Yimo was still in a daze. When she heard what she said, she raised her eyebrows. It's no trouble at all. In that case, miss, please. Another jade-like hand lifted the curtain, and a tall woman calmly walked out. It was clearly a simple movement, but when she did it, it was graceful and luxurious. She originally had her head lowered, but when she saw that everyone was silent, she strangely raised her head, and then smiled sweetly. This little girl is Jing Yun. Greetings, her exclamation almost overturned the entire brothel. Even Gong Yimo was a little stunned. She had seen countless beauties, but very few were as beautiful as her. If she really had to say, only the regent, who later cultivated and became a spirit, could be compared to her. When a person's beauty reached a certain level, it could not be described with pen and ink. It was said that beauties were not made of skin, but bones. This Miss Jing Yun's charm had already seeped into her bones. Her every move was really mesmerizing. Under her pair of peach blossom eyes, a small cinnabar mole fell on the corner of her eyes. It was like the finishing touch of a dragon. When this pair of eyes looked at one, half of one's body would turn soft. At this moment, Gong Yimo had such a feeling. The number one beauty in the world indeed lived up to her reputation. The strange thing was, why had she not heard of such a beauty in her previous life? Jing Yun's eyes curiously looked at Gong Emo and smiled. This little girl is new here, so I don't know what song to perform. Later, I hope that the young master can help me. Gong Emo nodded and smiled. This little girl is new here, so I don't know what song to perform. A beauty's smile was truly devastatingly beautiful. Below the stage, there were sounds of cold air being sucked in. Jealous gazes were thrown at Gong Yimo. Even Su Yuan, who was upstairs, said in a daze. If I had known, I wouldn't have brought the princess. Without her, I would definitely be the youngest one. Chapter 65. Shen Shiyi knocked him on the head and said angrily. What number one beauty in the world? She's clearly here for Gong Yimo. So as long as Gong Yimo is here, Jing Yun will definitely find all kinds of excuses to pull her up on stage. Don't even think about it. Shen Shiyi's words were like a basin of cold water, greatly dousing the enthusiasm of the youths in the private room. Li Ku said with a sullen face, let's watch first. This woman doesn't seem to have any evil intentions. Shen Shiyi nodded, his bright eyes staring unwaveringly downstairs. The more he looked, the more unconvinced he felt. What number one beauty in the world? To put it bluntly, she's just a scaredy cat. Besides, Gong Yimo, why is a girl like you so focused on her? No matter how you look at her, she's still a girl, all right. Following that, he touched his own face. Ever since he was young, everyone who had seen him had said that he was good-looking and had thrown compliments at him as if they didn't cost money. But even so, why didn't that damned girl look at him like that? Gong Yimo seemed to be dazzled by the other party's voice and appearance. When he reacted, he spread his hands innocently and said, but this young master doesn't know anything. Jing Yun seemed to be stunned for a moment, then smiled and said, no matter what instrument or song it is, this little girl can find a matching instrument or dance to perform on the same stage with young master. Little young master doesn't need to be modest. Who doesn't know that the capital is full of talents? Gong Yimo thought hard for a moment, then finally said dejectedly, I really don't know anything. How about this, with the accompaniment of the musicians, you can dance for me. Her bossy attitude and lack of tender feelings for the fairer sex made the people below the stage beat their chests and stomp their feet. If they were the ones going up, how good would it be? A talented scholar and a beautiful woman playing the zither and dancing together, it would be a romantic story. Hearing Gong Yimou's words and hearing the people below the stage calling for a change, Jingyun gritted her teeth and revealed a hurt expression. Since it's like this little girl will respectfully accept. As she spoke, she cast a coquettish glance at Gong Yimou. With the sound of the guzheng, she lifted her body and her entire temperament changed. She started to dance the most popular dance in the capital. Following her first dance step, 8 purple-robed beauties each with their own merits poured into the stage, and the entire stage immediately became dazzling. As for Jingyun, under everyone's envious gazes, he was circling around Gong Yimou, either kicking her or hugging her shoulders, shaking her so much that Gong Yimou felt a little dizzy. At this moment, she was standing in the middle of a group of beauties, listening to the celestial music in her ears. She was surrounded by enchanting, pure, and elegant beauties. If it was any other man, he would have already forgotten what year it was. However, Gong Yimou was a fake woman. These women's coquettish glances were thrown to the blind. At this moment, the leader of the group, Jingyun, smiled sweetly. Then, amidst the commotion below the stage, the 8 ladies slowly took off their outermost layer of gauze, revealing their short tube tops and flowing gauze trousers. In ancient times, this was considered very open, but this looming style was not something that could be seen all the time. However, it was a feast for Gong Yimou's eyes. He whistled softly. That person, her waist is so thin. And that lady, she really was born with a pair of good legs. Just as Gong Yimou was staring fixedly, Jingyun spun continuously. The white gauze on her body fluttered, making everyone's eyes want to stick to that gauze. Take it off. Take it off. This was definitely the voice of all the brothel patrons. As if to cater to those people, Jingyun leaned into Gong Yimou's arms. When they touched, she suddenly grabbed Gong Yimou's hand and stuffed something into her hand. It turned out that it was a corner of her gauze. As long as Gong Yimou tugged it gently, Jingyun's figure would be exposed in front of everyone. At this moment, she threw an ambiguous look at Gong Yimou, as if encouraging her to do so. Pull it off. Quickly pull it off. The people below yelled at the top of their lungs. Their eyes were red, and they wished they could climb up and pull it off on their behalf. Gong Yimou sighed helplessly. Then, with a flick of her finger, the white gauze on Jingyun's body slowly floated down. The people below the stage were in an uproar. A beauty, a beauty. A true beauty was not limited to her appearance. That kind of beauty came from the inside out. Perhaps because Jingyun had been practicing dancing for a long time, her figure was graceful and slender. Every part of her body exuded an explosive power. Gong Yimou's mouth watered at the sight of her lean waist and long legs. When the music ended, she leaned on Gong Yimou's body again. Her pair of flirtatious eyes looked at Gong Yimou as if they were dripping water. Little young master. She called out to Gong Yimou with all sorts of twists and turns. Her fingers gently lifted Gong Yimou's chin, and her breath smelled like orchids. This little girl is very interested in little young master visiting a brothel at such a young age. I wonder if little young master is willing to come into the tent later. You and I have a deep talk. Then, without waiting for Gong Yimou's reply, she got up and left. In an instant, she was surrounded by those high officials and nobles. How could she get in? At this moment, Shen Shiyi hurriedly ran over. Seeing that Gong Yimou was in a daze, he said in annoyance, "Look at how infatuated you are. Those who don't know better would think that you're really a man." Gong Yimou looked back thoughtfully. Seeing him smile, she said, everyone has a love for beauty. Why, even the #1 beauty in the world can't catch your eye. Just her. Shin Shi looked at the crowd and said disdainfully, she looks very ordinary. This young master doesn't like this kind of trash. Gong Yimo winked and laughed, then who can catch your eye? Do you think I'm good enough? Her face inched closer, making Shin Shi inexplicably nervous. He abruptly pushed Gong Yimo away and said with disdain, go away. You should be the one carrying this young master's shoes. At this moment, Gong Yimo didn't want to be mischievous with him. She pulled Shin Shi and said, today's business is done. You should go back. I still have something to do, so I won't be leaving with you. How can that be? Shin Shi didn't forget that Gong Yimo was only 12 years old. If she stayed in this kind of place, her reputation would be ruined. Her reputation had long been ruined, okay? Seeing that Gong Yimo didn't say anything, Shin Shi said, besides, they came here to play. They didn't say that they're leaving now. Gong Yimo looked at him in surprise. Suddenly, she smiled ambiguously and winked at him. I didn't expect. You young masters. Su Yuan is only 15, right? Shin Shi's face reddened. He straightened his neck and said, what are you thinking? This young master will leave in a while. You, what's with that look? What are you looking at? Gong Yimo shrugged indifferently, up to you. Anyway, I won't be going with you. With my martial arts, there's nothing to worry about. Hearing her say this, Shin Shi felt relieved. However, he was still a little unhappy. What's the matter? Gong Yimo smiled mysteriously. A beauty has a date. Chapter 66. As soon as she entered the room, she was greeted by a fresh mint scent that made Emo take a deep breath. The woman's boudoir in front of her didn't look graceful at all. On the contrary, it was a bit cold and cheerless. There was some unfinished writing on the desk. Gong Emo walked over to take a look. It was a Heart Sutra, but because the person who wrote it was quite casual, the Heart Sutra didn't look very romantic. It looked more like a work of art. Not knowing how much longer she had to wait, Gong Yimo picked up a pen and started sketching on a piece of white paper. She was thinking about the canal, which rivers could be used and which could not be. Speaking of which, she had traveled to many places in her past life. Everywhere she went, blood flowed like rivers. She did not pay much attention to these things. Just as she was lost in her thoughts, the door creaked open. A drunk woman walked in alone. She propped her forehead up and looked up. When she saw Gong Yimo, her eyes lit up. Little young master, I thought you weren't coming. Gong Yimo had forcefully sent the youths out just now. She did not expect that she would turn back. Gong Emo put down her pen, folded the paper, and put it in her arms. She grinned at Emo and said, how could I not come when the beauty has an appointment? Hearing her words, Jing Yun snorted. That coquettish snort was enough to make one's bones go soft. You really think you're a man, Chaoyang princess? I didn't expect you to be such an interesting person. Gong Yimo was not the least bit annoyed that her identity had been exposed. She slowly walked in front of Jing Yun and looked up at her. If your network was a little more detailed, you would know that I'm not a princess. Jing Yun covered her mouth and laughed. What difference does it make? You have that, as if I'm here in person, token on you. Who would dare to touch you? She even knew about this. Gong Yimo rubbed her chin. That's true. Then, you tried so hard to get close to me because of this token. That was originally the case. Jing Yun did not evade and said directly. Her straightforwardness surprised Gong Yimo. Then, why did you suddenly change your mind? Gong Yimo widened her eyes and asked curiously. Jingyun smiled and tapped her head. Of course it's because of you, my little princess. As she spoke, she seemed to be a little tired. She slowly walked into the inner room and lay on her side on the bed. Her body stretched out slightly, making the pose of a beauty lying on her side. She yawned. Speaking of which, I've heard your name the most in the past 2 years. You're even more famous than me, the most beautiful woman in the world. Really? Gong Yimou, who had followed them in, rubbed his nose. I didn't expect my reputation to spread so far. Jingyun glanced at her. Princess, you're too modest. Back to the topic. Who are you? Why are you looking for me? Gong Yimou looked at her curiously, looking innocent and naive. Her look made Jingyun laugh. Who didn't know that Dai Yu State had a clever and eccentric princess? She was so good at pretending, as if she had 1,000 faces. Originally, I needed to borrow your token for some matters. But recently, after hearing the latest news from Dai Yu State, I suddenly had a brilliant idea. She smiled sweetly and looked at her flirtatiously. Do you know Yuheng State? Gong Yimou was stunned. She smiled, but gradually became serious. Of course I do. Speaking of this time and space, it was a combination of the future China, Outer Mongolia, and other neighboring countries. It was divided into 4 countries, Yuqi, Yuheng, Luyi, and Dai Yu State. Among them, Dai Yu State was the largest. It was like a long winding dragon that coiled around the Yangtze River and Yellow River. In the north, it reached the current Erlianhout city. It was like a dragon's head that was raised high, separating Luyi in the northwest from Yuqi in the northeast. It reached the current Macau in the south, Tibet in the west, and Shanghai in the east. Although the land was large, it occupied the best position. To the north of Dai Yu State was Yuheng State. China had the smallest land among the 4 countries. It was connected to Dai Yu State and was its closest neighbor. Further northwest from Yuheng was Luyi. Therefore, Yuheng was sandwiched between Luyi and Dai Yu State. It faced Yuqi State in the northeast. Between the 4 major countries, there were countless small countries that were struggling to survive. As for Yuheng, because it was stuck between Diyu and Luyi, it was in an awkward position. Therefore, it was very difficult, but also very easy. Among them, the Yuqi kingdom was a Han country. Yuheng and Diyu shared the same Yellow River and also bordered the Luyi grassland. It was considered a semi-nomadic and semi-Han country. As for Luyi, it was a completely nomadic country. At this moment, a person from Yuheng had suddenly appeared in front of her. If the courtiers knew about this, it would be another round of trouble. Therefore, she blinked and said, "Little big sister, if you have something to say, just say it." Jingyun was amused by her words. She looked over with her charming eyes. Of course, I want to make a deal with the little princess. I heard that the crown prince of your country is going to build a canal. It will connect the capital to the Yangtze River, right? Gong Yimou nodded. It's true. Jingyun seemed to be very happy. She smiled. Is the princess going as well? Of course we are going together. That's great. Jingyun propped herself up and winked at her. I wonder if the princess was the one who came up with such a wonderful idea. Gong Yimou shook her head decisively. Who knows? In any case, it can't be me. That doesn't matter. A trace of suspicion flashed across Jingyun's eyes. No matter what, the princess is the crown prince's closest sister. Moreover, the crown prince thinks highly of you. Even the emperor of Dai Yu State seems to pay attention to you. From this, it can be seen that the princess's words carry a lot of weight. Gong Yimou didn't say anything. She just looked at her with a smile. But from what I know, the princess doesn't seem to be having a good time in Dai Yu State. Moreover, the princess has an extremely close younger brother. For this younger brother, the princess is very short of money. No, it should be said that she is short of everything. Gong Yimou glanced at her. You should have done a thorough investigation on me, of course. She winked at him again. Gong Yimou thought for a moment. I am quite short of money at the moment. What kind of deal do you want to make? Only then did Jingyun reveal a cold and stern expression other than a charming smile. His expression was full of seriousness. The Grand Canal you're going to dig will go from the south to the north, using the existing Yulong Inner Canal as a foundation. You'll expand it all the way to the capital, right? Gong Yimou nodded. That's right. She looked at Gong Yimou with sparkling eyes. The passion in her eyes made her look like she was deeply in love. Then may I ask, Princess, what do you think can make a lot of money every day? Gong Yimou had already thought about this question. She counted on her fingers for Jingyun. Exterminating families, killing people, robbing tombs, and... Her eyes flashed. Illegal immigration. Chapter 67. Jingyun smiled sweetly. Smuggling won't work. Even though Yuheng and Daiyu State share the same Huanglong waterway, the border between Luozhou and Luozhou is heavily guarded by both countries. Smuggling will be harder than ascending to the heavens. However, she changed the topic and couldn't help but smile. But it's different now. Daiyu State wants to dig canals. Water is alive, and Daiyu State has a vast territory. Once the project covers a large area, it will be difficult to control. Coincidentally, there are many waterways in the Huanglong waterway that extend downwards. If we secretly dig 2 waterways to the south and you cooperate with the construction of a few tributaries in the north, no one will know. When the time comes, in order to continue our cooperation, we can each sail to the border to exchange materials and then transport them back to the country for trade. No one will know. Gong Yimou smiled. You're thinking very far ahead. However, this is a huge risk. I can't do anything that will harm the country. Her meaning was clear. If you want her to take such a huge risk, you should at least pay a deposit, right? Jingyun gritted her teeth and said, of course. Since Yuheng will also use these secret waterways, I'm willing to bear the cost of excavating them. Gong Yimou looked at her. Even the most beautiful woman in the world and the most romantic person in the world wouldn't have so much money. Not only did she want to secretly dig canals in Yuheng, but she also wanted to fully fund the construction of the tributaries. This kind of power, wealth, and courage was not something a famous brothel could do. Princess, you don't have to worry about this. Jingyun glared at her coquettishly. Gong Yimou rubbed her nose when she saw her coquettish expression. She lowered her head and said, beauty is useless to me. Jingyun looked at her and sighed. I almost forgot that you're a little girl. Luckily, you're a little girl. If you were a prince, our Yuheng would have a lot to worry about. Gong Yimou thought for a moment and walked over. She sat down by Jingyun's bedside and looked her up and down. She giggled. It seems like you're not that useless. You know, although I'm young, I'm also someone who loves beauty. Jingyun was stunned and smiled. Is that so? Then do you think I'm beautiful? She crossed her legs. They were fair and well-proportioned, without a trace of excess fat. They were covered by a thin veil and vaguely displayed in front of Gong Yimou. What a beauty! Gong Yimou sighed in admiration. It's a pity that Jingyun is beautiful, but she lacks something. Oh. Her expression immediately became fervent. Who would care if she was a little more beautiful? Gong Yimou leaned forward. Her sudden approach caught Jingyun off guard and she subconsciously retreated. However, Gong Yimou accurately found Jingyun's neck and sniffed it. Her face showed a touch of regret. She sighed. Most women have a nice fragrance. That's the result of marinating their flesh with rouge and powder. It's a pity that sister smells nice, but, her expression turned bitter. Underneath this fragrance is the smell of a stinky man. What do you think should be done? Jingyun glared at her. Who are you calling a stinky man? She realized that she had misspoken and threw her a coquettish glance. Do I look like a man to you? What a joke. Gong Emo also laughed along with her. Her pair of eyes stared straight at Gong Emo's legs with a perverted look. Are you a man or not? Why don't you lift the veil a little higher? Her words were straightforward, but it made Jingyun's face turn from white to black and from black to purple. Finally, she forced a smile. Do you want to be my guest in my room? That won't do. Sister doesn't like girls. Gong Emo's eyes slowly moved upwards. Her scorching and curious gaze made Jingyun feel as if his body was being stung by something. He regretted wearing this gauze dress. It's fine if you don't lift it. I was curious just now. What did you stuff up there? Why did it sway like that when you were dancing, hooligan? Jingyun gritted her teeth. She covered her chest with her hands and glared at her. Her reaction was very feminine. She looked at the young lady in front of her. She was obviously beautiful but had a perverted look. It hurt her eyes. It seemed that she had to scare her. Jingyun narrowed her eyes. Little girl, do you know what propriety, justice, integrity, and shame are? If I'm really a man, what you said is very dangerous. She dragged out the word oh. Her expression was serious. The two of them were very close to each other. One leaned forward and the other leaned back. This position was really dangerous. But who was Gong Emo? She glanced at her. You can't beat me. Without waiting for Jingyun to vomit blood, she pointed at Jingyun's chest and smiled sweetly. How about this, if you tell me what you're patting on your chest, I'll agree to your request. How about that? Her words made Jingyun glare at her angrily. She silently swallowed back the blood. She asked tentatively, are you serious? You'll agree if I show you. Gong Emo nodded with a serious look on her face. Jingyun's eyes darted around. She found it funny. Since she didn't know where it was exposed, she wanted to make up for it. Hence, she put her fingers on her lapel. As long as she tugged at both sides, Gong Emo would be able to see it. Then I'll really take it off. She didn't believe that Gong Emo would dare to look. Gong Emo stared at her without blinking. Her eyes were almost glued to his chest. Jingyun gritted her teeth. This pervert. As he thought of this, he also became ruthless and tore open his lapel. She thought that Gong Emo would turn around the moment she pulled her lapel open. However, she didn't expect that the other party would really look at her without blinking. This scene made Jingyun feel uncomfortable. He was really a man. He had breasts, because there were 2 pouches filled with water tied to his chest. Gong Emo laughed out loud. She slapped the bed as she laughed. Wasn't it too funny? When she saw the 2 brown water balls tied to the other party's fair chest with white silk, she found it hilarious. Especially when the other party had an enchanting female face but an extremely flat chest. It was so awkward. She couldn't take it anymore. She was laughing so hard that the other party tore off the white silk in anger. When the other party revealed his reddened chest, Gong Emo was still in a daze. Are you done laughing? He reverted to his male voice. His original voice was magnetic and gentle. It was very pleasing to the ear. At this moment, he rolled his eyes. A female face doing such a thing made Gong Emo want to laugh. Little princess, why don't you tell me? How did you find out that I'm a man? The more Jingyun thought about it, the more he couldn't understand. Along the way, no one had seen through his disguise. He felt that his disguise was flawless. How could this little princess see through him? Gong Yimo laughed sneakily again. Finally, under the other party's increasingly angry gaze, she gradually stopped. However, her gaze unconsciously fell on the other party's neck. There was a light pink flower petal birthmark. Chapter 68. When she sniffed him just now, it was to see the mark on his neck. Sure enough, it was there. His identity was obvious. The second prince of the Yuhin kingdom, Kim Yoon. He was the son of a songstress. Although he was disliked, he was a loyal prince who served the kingdom wholeheartedly. Gong Yimo rarely thought about her past life. But if one had to ask, who did she let down the most in her past life? Gong Yimo smiled faintly. In her past life, she let down many people. Because she was ordered to fight in the north and south, she killed countless people and caused many innocent families to be separated. She was an executioner that everyone wanted to get rid of. But there was only one person she let down the most. Someone who was said to love her deeply. But that person was not the beautiful Jing Yun, but the ugly Kim Yoon. At a palace banquet, he unexpectedly fell in love with her at first sight. Later, he fought for her for many years and deepened this ill-fated relationship. Yes, Gong Yimo believed that she was Kim Yoon's ill-fated relationship. Kim Yoon was the most outstanding general in the Yuhin kingdom. He was also the prince who loved his people the most. However, he secretly helped her time and time again. He also put himself in danger because of her. In the end, when she had no choice but to lead the army to Yuhin, it was this man who did not want to make things difficult for her on the battlefield. He personally opened the gates to the Yuhin kingdom. So, in her past life, Kim Yoon bore the infamy and was executed by 1,000 cuts because of her. In the end, his corpse was fed to the dogs by the Yuhin kingdom. When she attacked the Yuhin kingdom, she could not even find his ashes. So, in her past life, when she killed many people, she thought that if she had not met Gong Chae, if she had met Kim Yoon earlier, a man who would love her wholeheartedly, she would not have suffered. Unfortunately, that was not the case. This time, she didn't recognize him at first. It was only when he offered to cooperate that she began to suspect him. Kim Yoon was originally a smart and far-sighted person. In his previous life, if not for the Yuhin royal family persecuting his mother, forcing him to disfigure himself and cripple his martial arts, with his loyalty, Yuhin would not have ended up like that. As expected, she also saw the cherry blossom birthmark on her neck. The first time she saw it, she laughed and said that it was a hickey. The other party's cold face told her that if anyone saw his face, they would never have the thought of kissing him. Gong Yimo did not believe him and said that she was absolutely not afraid. As for the envoy, Kim Yoon, she could do nothing about her honorable status and slowly took off her mask. It was a face that had been scratched into pieces. It was enough to stop children from crying at night. It was as terrifying as the king of hell. Kim Yoon was standing under a red plum tree at that time. When he looked at it quietly, his tone was terrifyingly cold, but it was deeply filled with the aura of death and despair. He touched his face. Was it scary? What did she say at that time? Gong Yimo thought back to that time and her heart couldn't help but feel sour. At that time, she said, if your face was good, you would definitely be a beauty that could topple the world. He was indeed a beauty that could topple the world. Kim Yoon loosened his grip on his chest and felt a lot more comfortable. Seeing that Gong Yimo didn't respond for a long time, he raised his head and saw that she was looking at him with a very complicated expression. It seemed sad and resentful, sad and happy at the same time. Kim Yoon was stunned. He didn't know why, but he seemed to feel that she was feeling sorry for him. Was it an illusion? The intelligence said that this little princess wouldn't wake up early if there were no benefits. She was very difficult to deal with. What's wrong with you? He faintly raised his eyebrows. That face of his was extremely moving, and even his casual movements were breathtaking. He was truly a peerless beauty. After all, his mother was the true peerless beauty whose name shook Yuhing back then. Gong Yimo came back to her senses and laughed. She still looked at him with a smile, but Kim Yoon felt that she seemed to be sad. I think our cooperation needs to change. Her words made Kim Yoon immediately alert. Was she trying to raise the price? How? Gong Emo looked at him. Her eyes were deep, and he couldn't understand the meaning behind them. About the underground river, I don't need you to pay for it. Why? Jin Yun immediately became anxious. Did this mean that he didn't agree? Gong Yimo shook her head. Our cooperation can continue, but I don't need you to pay for it. You have to know that I'm much richer than you. Moreover, in order to relieve the pressure on the Yangtze River, my original intention was to dig more tributaries to extend inland. The emperor will pay for it, so you don't need to worry. So with that money of yours, you should use it to bribe the people around you and protect yourself. Kim Yoon frowned. His eyebrows were now very thin, and when he frowned, it really made him look like a girl holding her heart, very lovable. There was no free lunch in this world. Kim Yoon really didn't understand what Gong Yimo meant. Why not? This is a good thing for free. Gong Yimo said lightly, I'm just afraid that you don't have enough money. After all, you're going to dig a canal in Yuhing. The cost will definitely be high, and it will take a long time. I don't want to take advantage of you. After all, we'll be working together for a long time in the future. You trust me that much? He frowned and asked suspiciously, you have to know that if we dig through the underground river, it'll be much easier for us Yuhing people to sneak in. Aren't you afraid? No. Gong Yimo smiled. It's convenient for you to come in, so isn't it convenient for me to go out? When the time comes, we'll just have to rely on our own abilities. Moreover. She narrowed her eyes and said calmly, moreover, when the canal is built, I'll naturally have troops to guard the door. You won't be able to come in. Moreover, there are so many tributaries. I can't just do business with you. She looked elsewhere, and it seemed that the mountains and rivers that extended in all directions had already appeared in her eyes. Those magnificent mountains and rivers, the close flow of trade, and all kinds of goods. It made people yearn for it. Therefore, she smiled slightly, domineeringly, and sighed as she spoke. I believe that illegal immigration is only temporary. One day, I'll open up the 4 countries to trade, and all the countries will be open to trade from all directions. This wasn't a fantasy. She could definitely do it. Her words suddenly shocked Kim Yoon. The ambition and determination in her words made Kim Yoon's heart tremble. He suddenly felt that his vision was too narrow. He was painstakingly currying favor with the affairs of one country, but this girl in front of him was not only developing herself, but also the country. She even wanted other countries to develop together with her. This kind of fearless and supreme spirit was far from what he could achieve now. No, no one could achieve it. This princess of the Chaoyang Empire, how did she grow up? Why did she have such ambition, and such thoughts that made people's hearts tremble? At this moment, Gong Yimo looked at him with a smile and reached out her hand. Her eyes were filled with deep nostalgia and expectation. I know who you are. I also know your talent, vision, situation, and everything else. But it doesn't matter. I only want to ask you, are you willing to cooperate with me? She said which was equivalent to telling him that all this was because of her. She was sincerely showing her sincerity. Kim Yoon hadn't recovered from her previous words when he saw the small hand in front of him. He was still a little stunned, but when he thought of his mother who was still suffering in the cold palace, he gritted his teeth. He was no longer afraid. Cooperation. Gong Yimo's eyes softened. Chapter 69. Just as they were preparing to set off, Gong Dai was about to reach Shizhou. Shizhou was located between Tibet and Lhasa, in the southern part of the Darim Basin. Dayu State was a long strip of land, and Shizhou was even longer. It bordered Luyi to the north, and there were many small nomadic countries in the grasslands to the south. Therefore, Shizhou had always maintained a strong military presence in 3 directions to guard the country. Seeing that they were about to arrive in 2 days, Gong Dai heaved a sigh of relief. The journey had been very smooth. He had walked through deserts, oases, snowy mountains, and grasslands. Only now did he know what the royal sister had described. He also knew how magnificent and compatible the country he was in was. His ancestors had slowly built this great country, and it was as beautiful as a painting. At this time, they passed by a village built near an oasis. Gong Dai ordered everyone to stop and rest. They would set off at night when it was not so hot. When the villagers found out that they were going to Shizhou for disaster relief, they warmly received them. Gong Dai was even arranged to stay at the village chief's house. Even though he had seen many along the way, Gong Dai still felt that it was very novel. The faces of the people here were very different from those in the capital. The royal sister had once said that there were many kinds of people's faces. In the distant south, there were even people who were completely black. It was a pity that he had not seen them along the way. Because the journey was tiring, other than the guards who had been arranged to keep watch, everyone else rested after their arrangements were made. Gong Dai went to lie on his bed, but he could not fall asleep. He felt that it was very strange because he had not received a single letter from the capital along the way. One had to know that the stewards in the capital would sometimes report to him. Could it be that the royal sister felt that he had left the capital and the distance to send letters was far, so she was diligent and took over all the work for once? Thinking of this, Gong Dai could not help but smile. He stroked the hair in his arms. He wondered if the royal sister was happy being alone in the imperial palace. Gong Dai slowly fell asleep as he recalled the other party's every frown and smile. After an unknown amount of time, someone sneaked into Gong Dai's residence. He was startled. With a hissing sound, he unsheathed his sword and stabbed it into the person's shoulder. The water basin fell to the ground with a bang, but Gong Dai ignored it. His eyes suddenly widened. Royal sister. The girl was so scared that she was trembling. She didn't even dare to move the basin of water that had fallen to the ground. After taking a closer look, Gong Dai blinked regretfully. So it wasn't his royal sister, but a girl who looked very much like her. However, this did not make him relax. Instead, it made him even more vigilant. He had never seen the art of disguise before, but there was clearly something fishy about this person's resemblance to the royal sister. Who are you? Who sent you? The narrow sword in his hand was pressed against the girl's neck. It seemed that if she said a wrong word, he would not hesitate to cut it down. His cold eyes made it seem like he was looking at a dead person, which made the girl tremble even more. I don't know what sir is talking about. I'm the village chief's adopted daughter. I'm here to bring you water to wash your face. The village chief's adopted daughter. Gong Dai narrowed his eyes as he sized her up. If that's the case, why did you come here to do such a lowly servant's job? His tone was very cold, but it made the girl's cheeks turn red. It's me. I wanted to come. I saw you on the horse earlier. She looked at Gong Dai with sparkling eyes. When she did this, she actually looked 80% like Gong Yimo. I admire Sir, so I came in. She did not care that Gong Dai's sword was still coldly pressed against her neck. She lowered her head and her face turned even redder. I heard that Sir is going to the west. Xiao Qiao is willing to follow Sir. After expressing her love, she did not say anything else. The tips of her ears were red, as if she was waiting for her sweetheart's verdict. However, Gong Dai only looked at her coldly. It was as if he was an ice-cold judge, making her lie look very clumsy. Is that so? Gong Dai sneered, but the tip of his sword pressed even closer to her neck. His action made the girl's heart beat wildly, but she forced herself to calm down. It's true, Sir. I admire you. She was originally a little disdainful. An 11-year-old little brat should be very easy to deceive. Why did he have to disguise himself as his sister? Could it be that he had some unspeakable feelings for his sister? But now, the sword pressed against her neck was motionless. She even felt that if it was not for her face, the other party would have killed her in an instant. At this moment, she finally felt afraid. Because she found that after she said those words, Gong Dai's murderous aura seemed to have solidified. All the words she had in her mind were firmly suppressed in her throat. She did not dare to say a single word. She only hoped that the other party would look at her face and let her live. You said that you admire me. The youth's cold voice suddenly sounded. Hearing this, the girl happily raised her head. But at this moment, she was forever frozen in place. She probably could not figure out why she was killed until she died. After killing her, Gong Dai finally felt that something was wrong. The girl in front of him was clearly sent by the people in the palace. Because they knew about the bond between him and the royal sister, they used such a trick. And the royal sister was in the palace, so she would not allow such a thing to happen. The only explanation was, the royal sister was not in the palace. At this moment, a person walked in. It turned out to be Bai Xing. He was the person that Gong Yimo had specially arranged for Gong Dai. Gong Dai could not help but glance at him. Because Bai Xing was someone that the royal sister trusted very much, he also trusted him very much. Bai Xing looked very ordinary. He was the kind that could not be found in a crowd. At this moment, he looked at the corpse on the ground and sighed. Your Highness, you shouldn't have killed. According to the thoughts of Gong Yimo and Jinshi of Gojoseon, they both hoped that Gong Dai would become upright and firm, just like a soldier. But Bai Xing, who knew him well, knew that the child in front of him was a murderous person. So he could only stop him. Last time, when he killed the bandits, he had already left a terrifying impression on the others. Who would have thought that he would break the rules again when they were near Shi province? Too noisy, so I killed her. For some reason, Bai Xing actually felt the murderous intent in Gong Dai's eyes when he looked at him. This realization made his heart tremble. Bai Xing hurriedly turned his face away and squatted down to check the corpse. As he turned the corpse over, he found that the eyebrows and eyes were extremely similar to the Chaoyang princesses. He was shocked. Although he did not understand what had happened, based on His Highness's friendship with the princess, this person looked so much like the princess. Even if there was something fishy going on, he should not have killed her just like that. He should have at least taken her down and interrogated her about her origins. He looked up at Gong Dai. At this moment, Gong Dai was sitting in front of a table and casually flipping through a book. He seemed to be thinking about something. His movements were slow and deliberate. He was clearly a cold and cheerless noble son. It was as if he was not the one who had attacked just now. Feeling Bai Xing's questioning gaze, Gong Dai glanced at him with his dark jade eyes. With just one glance, Bai Xing felt a chill run down his spine. They're two alike. In this world, there's only one imperial sister. Chapter 70. His tone was cold, as if he was explaining, but this explanation made Bai Xing even more nervous. His Highness couldn't have discovered something, right? For a moment, Bai Xing didn't know how to respond. After a long time, he heard Gong Dai suddenly laugh. The night here was very cold, but it was far less chilling than Gong Dai's laughter. Speaking of which, I'm very curious. After being out for so long, why haven't I received a single letter from the capital? Gong Dai raised his eyebrows and slowly said this. His face suddenly darkened as he looked at Bai Xing with a strong murderous intent. He crumpled a page of the book in front of him into a ball and threw it at Bai Xing's face, sneering, "Very good. I trusted you so much, but you dared to deceive me." It didn't hurt, but Bai Xing immediately knelt down, large beads of sweat sliding down his pale face. He had already dealt with it, but he didn't expect that there would be a fish that slipped through the net. It's over, with Gong Dai's character, those who betray him will definitely not have a good ending. He couldn't help but speak in a panic, "Your Highness, please forgive me. This was all the princess's idea, the princess just didn't want you to worry." Something really happened. Gong Dai narrowed his eyes and stared at him. "What else are you hiding from me? Speak." "Nothing." Bai Xing shook his head and said in a panic, "Other than the princess being demoted, there really isn't anything else I dare to hide from you." Demoted. These two words made Gong Dai's chest hurt so much that he almost vomited blood. He cared so much about her, so much that he loved her, but she actually hid such a big thing from him. Demoted, yeah. No wonder I didn't receive a single letter. So that's it. He had miscalculated, he trusted the royal sister and grandfather too much. Their financial resources were almost the same, so it was easy for them to work together to hide it from him. His words shocked Bai Xing. He hurriedly opened the paper ball by his feet to take a look. There was nothing on it. When he raised his head, he saw a cold sword pointed at his neck. There was even a trace of blood on it, which was left by the girl on the ground. Gong Dai stood in front of him, his anger surging. His black jade-like eyes gradually became bloodshot, and his entire being twisted like a ghost. "Tell me everything that happened in the past." Hearing Gong Dai's words, Bai Xing didn't dare to hide anything. With a pale face, he hurriedly explained the situation. His sword trembled in anger. It was very likely that in the next second, he would be like the woman on the ground and slit his throat. "I see. The royal sister has been demoted. How dare you? How dare you work together to deceive me?" Gong Dai took a deep breath and closed his eyes. He wanted to suppress the killing intent in his heart. No. He couldn't calm down at all. Whenever he thought of how Gong Yimo had been bullied by so many people and how she had been demoted to be alone, he wanted to go back and kill everyone in the imperial court. And Gong Che. What right did he have to make the royal sister plead for mercy? He was the crown prince. His maternal family had committed a heinous crime. Shouldn't he bear the consequences himself? And grandfather? Uncle? Why did they work together to deceive him? Why? Gong Dai's eyes were filled with cold murderous intent. "Prepare the horse. I want to go back to the capital. Immediately." Bai Xing was so frightened that he almost fainted. The West Province was right in front of him. If he went back, he would be disobeying the imperial edict. He would be beheaded. "Your Highness. How much effort did the prince and princess put in? How long did they plan for this opportunity? If you just leave like this, will you be worthy of the princess' painstaking efforts?" Bai Xing bitterly tried to persuade Gong Ju, but as soon as he opened his mouth, Gong Ju's sword pierced his neck, causing blood to gush out. "Shut up. I don't want to hear anything from you." Feeling the pain in his neck, Bai Xing suddenly had an epiphany. With Gong Dai's personality, he would have killed him long ago if he wanted to. Now that he was still alive, it must be because of the princess. Thinking of this, Bai Xing endured the fear and pain and said, "Even if you kill me, I will say it." This subordinate still remembers that the Chaoyang princess was looking for a suitable opportunity. She flipped through countless cases before coming up with this idea. In order to understand whether the Well Canal was suitable for the West Province, she studied the geology of the West Province for a whole month. After much deliberation, she finally finalized this plan. Before arranging for me to come here, she also repeatedly urged me to help you complete the task. Now that you want to go back, why don't you kill me first? It's better than me not being able to answer to the princess. Do you think I don't dare? Gong Dai's voice was as cold as ice. His hand gripped the hilt of his sword tightly. But when he heard Bai Xing's words, he couldn't help but think of Gong Yimo's appearance when she was busy writing. She was such a lazy person, but when she was dealing with this matter, she was so serious and considerate. "Royal sister, what should I do with you? What should I do with you?" The tip of the sword trembled, but in the end, it didn't cut down. Gong Dai threw the narrow sword into the bed, making a buzzing sound. Bai Xing's body went limp. He finally escaped with his life. When he saw Gong Dai turn around and leave without opening the door, Bai Xing's heart trembled and he heaved a sigh of relief. He advised in a soft voice. "This subordinate knows that your highness is worried about the princess, but the princess is also sincere to you. In all my life, this subordinate has never seen a sister who is so considerate of her half-brother. Your highness, can you really bear to let her down?" He was trying his best to persuade him, but Gong Dai didn't speak for a long time. Bai Xing was nervous and couldn't help but secretly look up. He saw that Gong Dai's back was facing him and his body was tense. He was even trembling slightly. Gong Ju raised his hand and looked down at his palm over and over again. His eyes were red, as if he was desperately trying to restrain himself. Every word seemed to be squeezed out from between his teeth. "I also know. I also know." Bai Xing was frightened by Gong Dai's appearance. He was shocked and panicked. He couldn't help but soften his tone again and again. "Your highness, don't worry. The princess is strong in martial arts and is resourceful. She will definitely be fine. She wants to see you achieve great things. This is the first step you have to take, achieve great things." Gong Dai's hands clenched tightly into fists, but then he released them. His voice fell silent. After a long time, he spoke in a cold and weak voice. "If I don't have her, what is the use of achieving great things?" His words made Bai Xing turned pale with fright. He really didn't expect Gong Yun to say such words. Wasn't it a man's innate ambition that existed in his bones and blood to make a name for himself? "But you're right." Gong Dai slowly lowered his head. His hands were clenched into fists by his side. Although his back was tense, there was a sense of desolation in it. She is not an ordinary woman. She never disappoints anyone, so. His fingers dug deep into his palms. "So I can't disappoint her. She won't fail, so I can't fail either. Otherwise, how can I stand by her side? But royal sister, you're too naughty. It looks like I can't let grandfather and royal sister control me anymore. I must monopolize all of this power. I can't let royal sister hide her ability from me. I want to know everything about her, everything about her." Chapter 71. The next day, Gong Yimo, who was far away in the capital, rubbed her slightly itchy ears and said with a face full of joy, "We're leaving in 3 days." She was too happy. She wanted to go out and play. She could even go see her master on the way. Today, Gong Yimo was wearing a lake green dress and her entire person was as refreshing and natural as a sprout. At this moment, she was sitting in the courtyard, beaming with joy as she ate big mouthfuls of ice flowers and chatted with Gong Che. She was very happy. Heavens! This is really delicious. Crown Prince Gij, don't you want to try it? Gong Yimo's face was full of happiness. It was as if being able to eat a bowl of ice flowers every day in this kind of summer was the greatest enjoyment. Gong Che also deeply felt that she was an extremely easy person to satisfy. Sometimes, when he came back with a slightly more exquisite piece of art, she would treat it as if she had received a treasure. I'm not eating. Gong Che did not like to eat desserts. This was something that Gong Yimo knew in her previous life. However, when they were husband and wife in her previous life, she liked to force him to eat things that he did not like to eat the most. This life was no exception. He was her Gij. She was meant to bully. She scooped a spoonful of the sweetest honey from the ice flowers and moved closer to Gong Che with a mischievous smile. I don't care. Being happy alone is not as good as being happy together. You eat. Just one bite. Just one small bite. She raised the silver spoon with one hand and raised the other hand in front of his eyes. Her snow-white little fingers gestured a small section, indicating that he could really only eat a little bit. Gong Che avoided it. He felt that it was unreasonable. This spoon was used by Gong Yimo. Recently, he was finding it more and more difficult to interact with Gong Yimo naturally. However, if he did not see her, he would be even more unable to adapt. The more he avoided it, the more Gong Yimo thought that he did not want to eat, so she wanted to force him to eat. Ayaya, Crown Prince Gij, don't hide anymore. It's going to melt. Seeing her smiling coquettishly, Gong Che really could not do anything about it. He could only lower his head and touch the spoon a little bit, putting a small piece in his mouth. It was really too sweet. Seeing that Gong Che was finally forced to eat it, Gong Yimo was satisfied and stuffed the remaining mouthful into her mouth. Her natural movements caused Gong Che, who was already feeling a little awkward to begin with, to instantly turn red. They shared a spoonful of ice flowers. Gong Che couldn't help but look at her lips that were covered in ice crystals. They were still glistening with moisture and were pink and tender. The weather seemed to have become hot all of a sudden. What's wrong with him? What's wrong with that inexplicable feeling in his heart? It was like a flash of inspiration. For some reason, Gong Che's heart was thumping when he saw the beautiful girl suddenly raise her head and smile at him. He actually remembered the bedroom techniques that the instructor had taught him. At that time, he originally wanted to have a tongfang, but Empress Mother was afraid that the women in the imperial harem would make a move on the tongfang maids, so he only watched and learned a little, but never put it into practice. All his intimacy was with Gong Yimo. Holding hands on a daily basis, kissing between the lotus flowers on the boat. This thought made his mouth even more dry. Those drawings that made people blush kept replaying in his mind. They shared a spoonful of ice flowers like that, just like the kissing in the drawings. Kissing. He couldn't help but look at Gong Yimo's red little mouth, but found himself yearning for it, yearning. What was he yearning for? Being stared at by Gong Che like this, Gong Yimo raised her head in confusion. What's wrong, Crown Prince Gij? Her skin was as white as snow, and under the reflection of the vines above her head, it was even more frighteningly white. Those bright black eyes were clean and clear, as if they were glistening. Looking at him like this, it actually made Gong Dai's heart beat faster and faster. Was his illness going to act up? No. His palms were sweating. Finally, he suddenly turned around and fled, locking himself in the room. But when he couldn't see her, the disappointment in his heart was indescribable. What was wrong with him? Gong Che threw himself on the bed, but his mind couldn't help but think. First, it was the book that the mama gave him to read, then it was Gong Yimo, until in his imagination, the person in the book became Gong Yimo's face. He was indescribably nervous, but the anticipation and longing in his heart exploded in an instant, almost drowning him. This wasn't right. Gong Che fiercely hit himself. How could he imagine such a beastly thing? His royal sister was still so young. She didn't know anything, and she had always protected him like he was her real brother. He didn't know why, but the words real brother made his heart tremble, so painful that he couldn't control himself. Why? In the past, when he wanted to get close to her, was it enough to hear her sweetly call him brother? Why now? The words real brother made him so uncomfortable. It was as if he couldn't breathe. Could it be? I like her. As if he was enlightened, he suddenly woke up. He stared blankly at a certain spot at the foot of the bed. I like Gong Yimo. His fingers unconsciously tightened on the brocade blanket, and this thought crazily took root and spread like a weed. He should clearly despise himself. He should fiercely beat himself up, and then completely kill this thought in the cradle. But the joy in his heart couldn't lie. Could it be that just recognizing his feelings for her made him so happy? No. She was his royal sister, his real sister. In the future, she would marry someone, and she would have a prince consort. Moreover, it was possible that he would personally hand her over to the other party. He didn't know why, but just thinking about it made him feel suffocated. His usually calm heart even gave birth to a murderous intent. He wanted to kill all the people who wanted to marry her. No. This wasn't him. He couldn't do this. Couldn't, Crown Prince Gage. Gong Yimo's voice made Gong Che tremble. Seeing that there was no answer, Gong Yimo strangely touched her chin. Just now, he ran away with a face full of panic. Could it be that his hidden illness acted up earlier? Thinking of this, Gong Yimo no longer slowly knocked on the door, but directly opened the door and walked in. There was no one outside, so she directly walked in. Sure enough, Gong Che was on the bed, but his face was pale and he looked as if he had lost his soul. Gong Yimo was shocked and walked a few steps forward. Crown Prince Gage, what's wrong? She saw that the other party didn't move, so she carefully sat on the side of the bed and frowned. Did your illness act up? Her words suddenly made Gong Che remember that time when his illness acted up. Gong Yimo gave him a breath for him. She kissed him many times. That soft touch and lingering wine fragrance seemed to come back from his memory. Seeing Gong Yimo so close, Gong Che could no longer control himself. He hugged her in his arms. Very tight. Tightly. Gong Yimo was hugged so tightly, it was very strange. The other party's body was so tense, as if he was restraining something. His hot breath scattered on her neck, making her itchy. She couldn't help but move, but Gong Che hugged her even tighter. Don't move. The youth's voice was hoarse and deep. If Gong Yimo could see his eyes, she wouldn't be so confused. Because they were husband and wife, she knew that every time Gong Che was aroused, his eyes would show a dark red color. It might be related to his hidden illness, but it was a unique style in the world. Chapter 72. This was a secret that even Gong Che himself did not know. He only knew that he had hugged her. God knew how much he wanted to lick her neck that was just inches away, or push her down on the bed. But he did not dare to do so. He was afraid that he would scare her. If Gong Yimo knew that he had such dirty thoughts towards her, she would definitely stay far away from him, so that he would never see her again. Thinking of this, he hugged her even tighter. He could not say it, and she could not leave him. She said it before, she said that she would not marry anyone, she said it before. And he did not want much. Really, as long as Gong Yimou stayed by his side like this, only accompanying him, he would not act rashly. He would be able to control himself. Gong Yimou felt like she was about to suffocate. What was this situation? Could it be that the crown prince had some hidden illness that she did not know about? He chanted the clear heart mantra in his heart again and again, smelling Gong Yimou's body fragrance that seemed to be able to calm people's hearts. After a while, Gong Chei's body slowly relaxed, but his hands were still hugging her, unwilling to let go. I'm fine. His voice was low and hoarse, which made Gong Yimou feel strange hearing it. Brother Crown Prince, what's wrong? Why did he suddenly become like this? She was really confused. Gong Chei lowered his head a little and took a deep breath. It was a long while before he spoke slowly. I just suddenly thought of Imperial Mother. His voice was very low. We can do whatever we want, eat whatever we want, and go wherever we want, but Imperial Mother, she committed a crime because of me, and was locked up in the temple because of me. As a son, I am very sad. When Gong Yimou heard this, she sighed in relief and quickly patted his shoulder to comfort him. So it's because of this, it's fine. Moreover, she has already withdrawn from the center of power. With Imperial Father's protection, nothing will happen to her. But in her heart, she thought, how could a person in a high position be so selfless? Even though the Empress was Gong Chei's mother, she was also the Empress of the Liu family. It was really hard to say who sacrificed what for whom. She had never thought that this was just an excuse that Gong Chei had used to cover up his loss of composure. Because Gong Chei, he was actually a very traditional person. If someone told Gong Yimou that Gong Chei had feelings for his sister, she would not believe it even if she was beaten to death. After comforting Gong Chei, Gong Yimou prepared to leave. Even if they were siblings, it wasn't good for them to stay together all the time. After all, this wasn't the modern era. It was really troublesome. Gong Chei had just laid down. During this period of time, he was also very tired. He had been rushing back and forth to deal with matters. Just now, his mood had risen and fallen again. He was very tired. After covering him with the blanket, Gong Yimou was about to leave, but her hand was grabbed by Gong Chei. Looking at her suspicious eyes, Gong Chei said softly, "Royal sister. Wait for me to sleep first before you leave." He seemed to lack a sense of security. Well, he had been through a lot in the past month, and he was only 16 years old. With so much pressure on him, it was normal for him to want someone to accompany him. This also showed that she had completely entered Gong Chei's heart and was firmly hugging onto another thigh. Thinking of this, Gong Yimou nodded happily and sat by the bed. Gong Chei was relieved. He closed his eyes and after a while, his breathing became even. Gong Yimou had nothing to do, so she looked here and there. The Crown Prince's room looked like a temporary residence. The decorations were very simple, and it didn't feel like a home at all. And how beautiful would it be if there was a retro gilded floor-to-ceiling vase next to the bookshelf? How artistic would it be if there were a few strong branches? Also, on the shelf, there were some antiques that were placed randomly. If those dried flowers could be placed horizontally on the shelf, she would be able to see a wall full of flowers the moment she came in. Her mood would be much better, and she was about to set off to the Yangtze River. It seemed like she could start preparing for her shipbuilding business now, also. She didn't want to monopolize the entire canal. She would be satisfied if she could monopolize a small part of it. But, how could she get it? After thinking for a while, Gong Yimou looked at her small hands and sighed. She was still too young. Everything she did at this age was too out of line. Seeing that Gong Chei was almost asleep, Gong Yimou gently removed his hand and tiptoed out. She didn't know that once she left, Gong Che opened his eyes. He sniffed his hand. His hand still had the sweet fragrance from Gong Yimo's hand. It was the smell of the ice flower just now. He took a deep breath and looked at the top of the curtain. His eyes were filled with deep confusion. What should he do? Yes, he couldn't fall deeper. He had to restrain himself. The sober Gong Che was obviously more rational. He deeply understood that if he fell deeper, it would be very harmful to Gong Yimo. She would be reviled by the world, but he wouldn't be too involved. This world was especially harsh on women. It wasn't that he didn't understand. He slowly clenched his fists. Restrain himself. He had to restrain himself. He could definitely restrain himself. Time flew by quickly. The resources and people were all in place. Because they were leaving tomorrow, Gong Che stayed in the East Palace tonight. No. It should be said that since that day, Gong Che stayed in the East Palace for 3 consecutive days. The reason was different each time. But would Gong Yimo find out about this? Even if Gong Che didn't come back for a month, she would just think that he was busy with something and wouldn't disturb him, okay? It was late at night. Gong Yimo was still reading. It couldn't be helped. They were leaving tomorrow. She was so excited that she couldn't fall asleep. She was reading a book about shipbuilding. Dayu State's shipbuilding industry was very developed and was at the forefront of the world. However, in order to make her own fleet more competitive in the future, Gong Yimo had no choice but to work hard. Study carefully. Just as she was engrossed in reading, the sound of a heavy object falling to the ground suddenly came from the courtyard. Gong Yimo didn't find it strange. Because they were leaving tomorrow, the people guarding the courtyard were all transferred away today. Why did someone come tonight? Thinking about it, she put down the book and walked out. As soon as she opened the door, the faint smell of blood in the air deeply stimulated Gong Yimo's nerves. She took a deep breath and walked straight to the corner of the wall. A person was lying there with disheveled hair. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Gong Yimo turned him over and used the moonlight to see his face clearly. Shen Shiyi. Her voice made Shen Shiyi open his eyes. At this time, he was covered in blood. It was obvious that he had suffered a lot of injuries. Gong Yimo quickly helped him up and channeled her internal energy into his back. Shen Shiyi coughed a few times, and a trace of color returned to his face. What happened? Gong Yimo's tone was very serious. She thought about it and said, "Is it your stepmother?" Shen Shiyi nodded weakly. Young master, I'm fine." He smiled with a pale face and rested his head on Gong Yimo's shoulder. "There's nowhere to hide. I can only come here. You said that I trust you. Don't hand me over." Chapter 73. At this moment, the sound of footsteps could be heard. Shen Shiyi's eyes widened as he forced himself to say, Her men are all out. Just hide me." He did not want to cause trouble for Gong Yimo. As long as he could hide for the night, he would enter the palace tomorrow. He did not believe that woman would dare to kill her way into the palace. At this moment, Gong Yimo suddenly remembered how Shen Shiyi died. It was said that he was severely injured and knocked on the palace door early in the morning. While the imperial physician was still treating him, his father barged in with his men. Before they came, King Ping had already told the emperor that his unfilial son had raped the daughter of the neighboring Li family while he was drunk, causing her to hang herself early in the morning. He was also severely injured by the family servants. Who would have thought that he would hide in the palace? In addition to the Li family's grievances early in the morning, the emperor was furious and ordered King Ping to personally throw his son into the dungeon to await his punishment. Poor Shinshiryi died on the way to the dungeon due to ineffective treatment. 10 years later, the Li family was exiled for committing a crime. They asked King Ping for help, but King Ping refused. In their anger, the Li family revealed that consort Ping had severely injured the crown prince and caused his death. Now that she thought about it, King Ping could not escape from this matter. The reason why Shinshiryi was covered in injuries was because of the violent consort Ping in the palace the previous night. The next day, he indiscriminately went along with the Li family's words to capture Shinshiryi. It was obvious that he wanted to cover up the truth for his wife. As for his death due to ineffective treatment, people said that even a vicious tiger would not eat its cubs. It seemed that King Ping was quite a character. Shinshiryi panicked when he heard the approaching footsteps. When he saw that Gong Yimo did not move, he thought that she was in a difficult position. Well, she was just a commoner now, how could she help him go against the entire palace? Hence, he stood up and was about to say that he would leave on his own. However, when he smelled the blood on his body, he retched and his face turned even paler. Damn it, was there really no one who could help him? At this moment, Gong Yimo also moved. She stood up and carried Shinshiryi by the waist. With a light tap of her toes, she leaped onto the roof and rushed in a certain direction. Where are you taking me? Shinshiryi was stunned, and then he became anxious. His body was in excruciating pain, and he had fainted at the sight of blood, but he had gritted his teeth all the way to this place. Gong Yimo stopped under the eaves of a hidden bucket arch and put him down. Looking at the rows of torches below, her eyes flashed and she took out something from her space. The emperor gave her so many things, but the things that she kept in her space were the best of the best. And this rejuvenation pill was the national treasure of a small country in the extreme south. As long as there was a breath left, it could bring back spring. After Shinshiryi consumed it, he felt a wave of heat surge through his entire body. The feeling of dizziness and nausea disappeared, but because of his external injuries, he was still very weak. Where do you want to take me? This time, his aura was a little stronger, but his originally bright eyes were now extremely dim, and his lips were also pale. Gong Yimo looked in a certain direction without even turning her head. Her tone was unclear as she said, "Of course we're going to Prince Ping's residence." Shinshiryi was shocked. Are you crazy? Do you know how many people I sacrificed to escape? Gong Yimo glanced at him lightly, her tone slightly serious. Don't you want to know why you made such a big fuss, but no one stopped you? Also, your grandmother loved you so much, but she didn't appear tonight. Aren't you worried about her? She knew that in her previous life, Shinshiryi had died, and his grandmother had passed away not long after because of excessive worry. Thinking of his white-haired grandmother, Shinshiryi was speechless. At this moment, Gong Yimo smiled sweetly. Under the moonlight, her youthful side profile revealed a strange charm when she smiled. It was even more dazzling than the full moon behind her. A hidden sword silently slid out from Gong Yimo's sleeve. She twirled the sword and looked in the direction of Prince Ping's residence with a sly smile. Also, didn't you say, she turned out in full force. She revealed her white teeth, like a cunning fox. Then why don't we kill our way back? Reporting to your highness, we haven't found Dongqing. One of them knelt on the ground, while the woman's face twisted in anger. Useless. Why did you come back when you can't even catch an injured person? Get out of here and look for him. That person hurriedly retreated, while an old mama cautiously stepped forward. Your Highness, please calm down. His Highness said that if he really escaped, there's no need to worry. He still has a plan that will definitely kill that little bastard. Her words finally made the princess's expression look better. She raised her voice and asked, "What about His Highness?" The mama replied, he went to the Li residence next door to discuss a plan of retreat. He should be back soon. The princess scoffed. Under the light, her originally pretty face looked extremely terrifying. She couldn't take it lying down when she thought of how so many people couldn't find a useless person. Don't let me catch him. Otherwise what? A pleasant female voice suddenly sounded from outside the door. It sounded like a young girl. The princess turned pale with fright and hurriedly led people out to see. Gong Yimo hid Shinshuryi in the rockery and raised her eyebrows with a smile. You just stay here and watch. Watch how I seek justice for you. Shinshuryi was confused the entire way. Why did he come back for no reason? When he heard her words, his expression suddenly turned strange. I won't look. I'll faint at the sight of blood. Ever since his mother wore an opera costume and sang, "Farewell my concubine," and slit her throat in front of him, he felt so scared that he wanted to vomit or even faint every time he saw the blood splattered. God knows how many times he had to bite the tip of his tongue to force himself to escape under the protection of others. Gong Yimo rolled her eyes. On the other side, the princess had already led people out. You have to look even if you don't want to. Otherwise, I'll gouge your eyes out. After saying that fiercely, she jumped out of the rockery. The princess was aggressive, but when she saw who the other party was, her face became even more twisted. Gong Yimo. Why are you here? Don't tell me that unfilial son is hiding at your place. Naturally, she had seen Gong Yimo before. She had even flattered her and served her for the entire banquet. But so what? She was just a commoner now. It seems that you haven't learned your lesson. You should know that trespassing into the prince's residence is a capital offense. Gong Yimo looked at her with a smile. There were still some people protecting her behind her, but there weren't many. There were only a dozen people, so it wouldn't take much time. She weighed the sword in her hand and raised her eyebrows at the other party. Do you know what will happen if a hostage sees the kidnapper's face? She opened her mouth and asked a question that seemed to be completely unrelated. While the other party was stunned, Gong Yimo touched her face and sighed. I have no choice. Because you saw my face, I can only kill you to silence you. Chapter 74. Protect the princess consort. After a series of screams, the princess consort was pulled into a protective circle, while Gong Yimo closed in on her step by step. The bloodstains left by Shinshurye's previous attack were still on the ground, but as soon as Gong Yimo's blade fell, a new color was added to the blood. For a moment, the women's screams continued. Why did Gong Yimo do this? Didn't she know that if she was arrested for doing this, she would be dead? Could that unfilial son, Shinshuryi, be able to make Gong Yimo risk her life for him? The princess consort couldn't figure it out. Even Shinshuryi couldn't figure out why she would do this for him. She wouldn't wake up early if there were no benefits. This matter could be said to have no benefits for her. Her action of returning to the palace was also extremely risky. If those people came back early and captured her alive, the crime of trespassing into the palace and killing someone was enough to make Gong Yimo put her to death. Was she not afraid of death? Blood splattered. Gong Yimo's movements were nimble as she shuttled back and forth like a butterfly. Shinshuryi was in the rockery, his eyes wanted to look but didn't dare to. Pooh! When the artery was cut, the blood spurted out, causing Shinshuryi to tightly close his eyes. The scene of his mother's death 10 years ago replayed over and over again. He was so disgusted that he wanted to vomit. The feeling of fainting emerged again, but Gong Yimo suddenly called his name, causing him to wake up. Shinshuryi. Open your eyes. Although Gong Yimo didn't look in his direction, she knew that he definitely didn't open his eyes. Her white clothes were stained with large patches of blood. Her entire person was like a demon, showing a completely different style than usual. Shin Shi resisted the nausea and opened his eyes. Gong Yimo smiled. Under the moonlight, her face was splattered with blood. At this moment, she actually closed her eyes, as if she was enjoying killing someone. Open your eyes and look clearly. I am killing for you. After saying that, she suddenly opened her eyes and directly cut a person's throat. This scene was exactly the same as his mother's suicide 10 years ago. He was killing for me. When Wang Fei heard that Shin Shi was also here, she woke up as if from a dream. The guards in front of her fell to the ground. Quick! Quick, call me Wang Ye. Go quickly. However, after she finished speaking, the maid did not move at all. It turned out that Gong Yimo had already killed all the guards. The hidden blade dripped with blood and looked over with a smile that was not a smile. Your Highness. Gong Yimo said with a smile. Unexpectedly, the moment she opened her mouth, Wang Fei fell to her knees in front of her. Her face was pale as if she had seen an evil spirit. He didn't expect her to be so powerful. That's right. This was the person who started a massacre in the cold palace at the age of 10. Too much time had passed, so much so that the world had forgotten that Gong Yimo had such a side to her. Please don't kill me, don't kill me. I didn't do it on purpose, it was His Highness. It was the prince who wanted to kill that bastard, no, the heir. It has nothing to do with me. As she spoke, her body trembled and she was so frightened that she lost control of her bladder. Gong Yimo pointed at her and suddenly turned her head with a smile. Shin Shi, aren't you usually quite arrogant outside? But because of this woman, this kind of family, you were so afraid and conflicted for so long. Actually, Gong Yimo knew that Shin Shi had lost his mother when he was young. His father didn't love him and his stepmother made things difficult for him every day. When he was young, this woman must have left an indelible shadow in Shin Shi's heart. When he grew up, he didn't know how to resist. It was like a wild beast. When he was young, he fought fiercely. When he grew up, he dared to go around biting people and didn't dare to bare his fangs at the person who hurt him. Or perhaps he still had a trace of hope for this family and his father. However, this trace of hope was now ruthlessly crushed under Gong Yimo's feet. He supported himself on the rockery and stood up. When Wang Fei saw Shin Shi, a trace of resentment appeared in her eyes. If she had known earlier, she would have poisoned him to death long ago. Shin Shi looked at her and even he found it very strange. It was this kind of woman, a sharp, mean, and useless woman that harmed his mother and him. When he was young, he was often abused by her, but in the end, he couldn't do anything to her. Every time, he would be scolded by his father, making him feel wronged and angry. When he grew up, he didn't dare to make a move against her. The fear from when he was young seemed to have been deeply ingrained in him, so he always acted tyrannically outside and caused trouble for the family. It was just that he had resentment in his heart that he couldn't vent. It was because he hated her in his heart, but he always felt that he couldn't bring her down. She was protected by his father and was invincible. At the same time, he hated himself for being like this, so it was a vicious cycle. But now, this invincible woman in his mind was like a dog lying at Gong Yimo's feet. Shin Shi suddenly felt his heart ache. It wasn't worth it for him and his mother. A blood-stained sword was handed to him. The girl's voice was clearly smiling, but it was filled with endless coldness. Kill her, she said. There was no need to consider the consequences, only whether he was willing to do it or not. Mysteriously, Shin Shi took the sword. When the princess saw him do this, she went forward and hugged Shin Shi's leg. She cried and begged. Shi, child, You can't do this, I am your aunt, I am your mother's blood-related little sister. A trace of cruelty appeared on Shinshurye's pale face. It's because you are my aunt that you deserve to die. He sighed and then smiled. This smile on his blood-stained face was shockingly beautiful. Mother is lonely, go down and accompany her. Remember, properly admit your mistakes. After he finished speaking, he stabbed down with the sword. Blood splashed out, but he didn't know why this time. He didn't feel disgusted. It was his first time killing someone, but that moment of coldness made him feel like he had killed countless people. It was like something in his heart was broken. He didn't seem to be afraid of anything for a moment. Gong Yimo saw his hand slightly tremble and couldn't help but bitterly smile. In her previous life, the first time she killed someone, she slit a person's neck from behind. Later, she dreamed that she would repeat the action of slit the neck all night long. The feeling of the blade cutting open the blockage was also replayed over and over again. The process was not beautiful. She didn't want to kill people, she didn't want to kill people. But in this ancient time, sometimes using power to suppress violence, using wealth to suppress violence is not as good as using violence to suppress violence. This was something she suddenly realized after killing countless people. So from then on, she was no longer afraid of killing people. Instead, as long as she made a move, she would hit the fatal point. This way, at least those people would feel less pain. When the rest of the women saw Shin Shuryi suddenly raise his head to look at them, they screamed one after another. Some even fainted. He slowly walked over and killed them one by one. This point made Gong Yimo very surprised. Since they saw you, they can't be left alive. Shin Shuryi looked at Gong Yimo and explained. Gong Yimo smiled. At this time, her face was covered in blood. She suddenly moved closer to Shin Shuryi. Didn't you faint from blood? What? Are you okay? She deliberately moved her bloody face closer, thinking that Shin Shuryi would avoid her. Who knew? He looked deeply at Gong Yimo, as if he wanted to see this person in his heart. Chapter 75. What kind of a person is she? Did she also see the fear in my heart? Was she laughing at me in her heart while helping me break all the cages? Without destruction, there can be no construction. She. What kind of person is she? Seeing him staring at her in silence, Gong Yimo wiped her face in boredom. Don't be in a daze. Do you know what to do next? Shin Shuryi pondered for a moment. I still have some power and can protect myself. Tomorrow, I will ask my brothers to put in effort and get the family to jointly submit a memorial saying that a spy from another country has infiltrated King Ping's residence. That's why there was a night of fighting and so many guards were sent out to look for her. Gong Yimo nodded. Shin Shuryi was quite smart. Spies from another country and whatnot were the few words that people in high positions were most afraid of being tainted with. The crime of treason was enough to implicate 9 generations of the family. So as long as Shin Shuryi dared to do this, King Ping would definitely tuck his tail between his legs out of fear and try his best to suppress this matter, turning a big issue into a small one. Don't even talk about slandering his own son. Just one more glance at his residence was enough to make him tremble with fear. Hearing the sound of approaching footsteps, Gong Yimo yawned, feeling a little sleepy. Then do you know what you will do when you see your father later? Thinking of his father, a murderous look flashed across Shin Shurye's eyes. He sneered, as long as he steps through the courtyard door, I will chop off this woman's head. Throw it into his arms. It was as if he had been reborn overnight. He was no longer the domineering son who avoided reality and only knew how to get into trouble while waiting to succeed the throne. Gong Yimo giggled and stuffed something into his hands. I will be leaving tomorrow and I don't know when I will be back. If I come back. If you can take over the position of the left commander of the Imperial Army, I will bring you a gift." With that, she turned and left. With a light tap of her toes, she leaped onto the wall. She turned and the bright full moon behind her complemented her arrogant figure as she laughed with her hands on her hips. "If anyone finds trouble with you again, use this to smash their faces." Shen Shiyi flipped the plaque in his hand over to take a look. The words, "as if I am here in person," were like a dragon baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. He raised his eyebrows and smiled. Are you all right?" Grandmother's frightened and worried voice could be heard from afar, as well as the footsteps of the guards. Shen Shiyi looked up and sighed. For him, this night was still very long. The group left the capital. Before they set off, the imperial edict had already been sent to various places in the south. This time, they did not bring many people. They only brought 2,000 people to escort the goods and tools. The craftsman, the water minister, and the others were at the back of the group. There were 50 carriages. When Gong Che bid farewell to the emperor asked with a faint smile, "The little girl is not in the convoy, is she?" These words made Gong Che's face look very embarrassed. Then, the emperor laughed loudly, patted him on the shoulder, and let him go. Sitting on the back of his horse, Gong Che couldn't help but turn his head to look. Above the city gate, the emperor stood majestically, sending him off with his gaze. His gaze was heavy, as if he had great expectations and trust in him. Imperial father. He may not be a good father, but he really is a good emperor. With this thought, Gong Che seemed to have made some kind of decision. He spurred his horse forward. Inside a carriage, a small head poked out of the window. She looked in the direction of the emperor and waved her hand. When the emperor looked over, she quickly made a face. Seeing this, the emperor didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This girl. The more Gong Ching smiled, the more his heart ached. This girl was broad-minded. She clearly didn't hold a grudge. Even if he belittled her in front of everyone, she was clearly a good child, and she was wholeheartedly doing good deeds. Unfortunately, in the future, because of her, he didn't know how much of a reign of terror there would be. Gong Che also saw Gong Yimo's actions. He was originally worried, but when he saw the emperor's dragon heart, he couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. That's right, who wouldn't like her? She made people unable to dislike her, right? Only Gong Che, who was in a hurry to restrain himself from staying away from her, felt his heart ache. He spurred his horse to the front. Shirley Pavilion. Last time, Gong Yimo was here to bid farewell to Gong Dai. She didn't expect that when she came here again, there would be someone waiting here. Shen Shiyi stopped the carriages and arrogantly said to Gong Che, "Crown Prince, this young master's friends also want to go with you. After today's parting, I don't know when we'll meet again. So I want to delay the Crown Prince for some time, so that we can drink a cup of wine and bid farewell." This was human nature. Gong Che nodded, and a carriage immediately came forward from behind. Su Yuan lifted the curtain and beamed with joy. "Heir apparent is really loyal. He actually came to see us off." Shen Shiyi smiled, then suddenly coughed a few times. He was seriously injured last night. Why didn't he stay at home to recuperate? While the carriages were resting, Gong Yimo jumped off her horse and quickly walked over. At this time, she was wearing men's clothing, and it was extremely flashy. It was silver white, and it was all outlined with gold and silver threads. She wore a dazzling gemstone crown on her head, and silver silk short boots with pearls on her feet. It was as dazzling as it could be. Seeing her walking towards them, the sunlight shone on her body, and it was simply glaring. Shen Shiyi covered his eyes in discomfort. "Hey! Are you wearing all your belongings on your body?" Gong Yimo looked at herself. Everywhere was shiny. How beautiful. She was a girl. Didn't girls like shiny things? She raised her little chin and said unhappily, only I can hold up this clothing. If you have the guts, why don't you try it? Shinshiryi felt hurt looking at her. I don't have the hobby of wrapping myself in silver. He coughed a few more times. This time, it was Gong Yimo's turn to rejoice in his misfortune. Oh, heir apparent doesn't look good. Did you have an affair last night? Shinshiryi rolled his eyes at him. Yes, I did. At this moment, Gong Che also walked over. Now that everyone was present, Yuziching hurriedly filled the cups with wine and handed them to everyone present. Okay, don't say any more. We're here to say goodbye, not to quarrel. Can't you act a little sad? No. Shinshiryi angrily took the glass of wine. Look at Gong Yimo's silly smile. She was looking forward to it. Where was the trace of reluctance in her eyes? Shinshirye's heart was ruthless. He also didn't feel reluctant. Gong Che looked deeply at Shinshiryi, then quickly looked at Gong Yimo and smiled. Many thanks to heir apparent for sending us off. Let's drink this cup of wine as a farewell. When everyone heard Gong Che's words, they thought about how high the mountains and rivers were and how long they would be gone. When they thought about the people and matters in the capital, they still felt a little melancholy and raised their cups one after another. I, Su Yuan, hereby swear that this time, I will do great things. Let my brother see. Su Yuan said very grandly and drank it in one gulp. Yuziching also smiled. Then I, Yuziching, will also swear that this time, I will write down everything I see and hear in my travels. I will show those bookworms in the capital what it means to travel 10,000 li better than to read 10,000 books. After saying that, he also laughed and drank. Chapter 76. Little fatty Chin Ching thought for a while. I don't have anything I want to swear on. I just want to eat all the good food along the way and see what's the difference between the north and south. As for Li Ku, he didn't say anything. He just drank his cup with little fatty. Shinshiryi glanced at Gong Yimo and laughed. Just wait and see. I will definitely become the capital's Imperial Guard's left commander. When you guys come back, I will still be the one to protect you. As he spoke, he drank his cup in a very heroic manner. Listening to the other boys' expectations for the future, Gong Che's eyes also showed a trace of heroism. This prince will definitely build a canal to benefit the people. After speaking, he raised his head and drank his cup. Finally, everyone's gaze fell on Gong Yimo. Looking at the ambitious and vigorous youths in front of her, Gong Yimo grinned. May all of us succeed. After speaking, she drank her cup of wine amidst their cheerful laughter. Since ancient times, sorrow was often accompanied by parting. Because there was no electronic communication, sometimes a short separation could be an eternal separation. But they were young. Being young meant that there were unlimited possibilities. There was nothing to be afraid of. Only by moving forward and fighting. Only then could they achieve what they wanted the most. This was youth. After parting at Shirley Pavilion, the youth's moods were clearly depressed. Gong Yimo quickly went over and took out the cardboard cards that she had cut and mysteriously said, "Don't be so depressed. Don't be so lifeless. Come, I'll teach you a game you've never played before." Thinking of the princess's clever mind, the few of them swept away their depression and one by one, they became spirited. Under the expectant gazes of the three youths, Gong Yimo taught them how to play Fight the Landlord in one go, how to run fast, how to level up, and many other games, dazzling them. As for Li Ku, he was reading a book at the side, being a quiet handsome man. But the infuriating thing was that when they played Fight the Landlord, Gong Yimo was the only one who won during the trial period. When it came to the money, these boys seemed to have changed into another person. The one who calculated was the best, while the careless Gong Yimo kept losing. She searched all over her body and found that she really didn't have any money. She lifted the curtain and shouted to the front. "Crown Prince Gage! Brother Crown Prince!" Hearing Gong Yimo's voice, Gong Che's back tensed up for a moment. Although he wanted to pretend that he didn't hear anything and continue walking, the horse beneath him was very obedient. It slowed down until it was parallel to the carriage. What happened? His tone and expression were still very gentle. Gong Yimo did not notice any difference in his voice. His little face fell miserably. "Big brother Crown Prince, they ganged up to bully me. I don't have any money on me. Big brother Crown Prince, can you lend me some?" Gong Che's expression didn't change. He directly took a purse from his waist and gave it to her. "If it's not enough, ask me for more." After saying that, he stomped his feet and walked to the front again. Gong Yimo looked at his back and thought it was strange, but she didn't think too much about it. She took the money bag and got into the carriage with a smile. "Rich again. With so much money, I don't believe you can win it." She happily grabbed the tiles, but Su Yuan and Yu Ziqing looked at each other mysteriously. Yu Ziqing said, "Don't you think the Crown Prince is strange?" A3. Gong Yimo took the time to reply. "How is it strange?" She clearly didn't care. Su Yuan nodded seriously. "A 9 is very strange. You know, if it was in the past, he would definitely scold us if he saw you hanging out with us and gambling." "Scold them, not Gong Yimo." Is that so?" Gong Yimo's eyes lit up. She hurriedly stopped playing and excitedly gossiped with them. "How is it not so?" Su Yuan continued to analyze. "In the past, the Crown Prince protected you like you were the apple of his eye. Others couldn't even look at you. Now, it seems like he's letting you do whatever you want." Hearing him say this, Gong Yimo rubbed her chin and asked in surprise, "So, I've fallen out of favor?" Li Ku had been reading in the corner. Seeing that they were getting more and more excited, he couldn't help but sigh. "Princess, don't think this matter is getting out of hand. How can the Crown Prince not care about you?" However, Su Yuan wasn't convinced. "The truth is the truth," Gong Yimo shrugged and said nonchalantly, all right. Let's not talk about this nonsense. I'm tired from playing cards. Let's talk about business." The moment she talked about business, the few of them gathered around her, looking serious and obedient. Gong Yimo said, "For this trip, we'll be going to Star City first. We'll set off from Star City's section of the Yangtze River and head all the way up. We'll check the situation of the former Yulong Inner Canal." Li Ku thought for a moment. Most of the Yulong Inner Canal is blocked. Just clearing the lake will take a lot of time and effort. "So, I need some things." Gong Yimo's eyes flashed and she whispered in everyone's ears. After she finished speaking, they all looked at her strangely. "What are you looking at?" Gong Yimo said fiercely. "When we reach the next destination, go and buy them. Remember, the more the better." Little Fatty stretched out his hand. "Buy things? Where's the money?" Gong Yimo smiled evilly. "The money? Didn't you guys win it just now?" Seeing that the youths were not convinced, Gong Yimo glared at them fiercely. "Stop bargaining. Otherwise, my methods. Humph. I'm sure you won't want to try them." Just like that, the convoy traveled along the intermittent flow of the river, checking the data along the way. By the time they reached Star City, it was already a month later. The governor of Star City had received the news early in the morning and came out to welcome them from afar. As for the group of people who were weary from the long journey, other than Gong Che who stayed behind to support them, everyone else rushed to the guest rooms to rest. The next day, Gong Yimo woke up bright and early. She first ordered people to move all the things they bought along the way to her courtyard. Then, she locked the door and started working. As for how to quickly clear the river, Gong Yimo couldn't make something like an excavator. Hence, she could only use the simplest and most violent method, which was to blow it up. At this moment, Gong Che was discussing official matters with the governor. This section of the Jade Dragon Canal in Star City is tens of kilometers long. The raised riverbed will cause many blockages. Hence, this prince wants to recruit laborers to widen the river. The governor's small eyes flashed. Since your highness said that you are following orders, why don't you just put up a notice to recruit laborers? One must know that laborers didn't have to pay, but laborers had to pay. Moreover, laborers had to work for each family. Laborers were different. In his opinion, when it came to widening the river, without hundreds of thousands of laborers, how long would it take to complete the task? Gong Che smiled. There's no need for so many people. I only want strong and healthy people. Moreover, this prince will pay. Everyone will be paid 20 copper coins for half a day. The governor was shocked. 20 copper coins was already quite a lot. Ordinary people could only earn 10 to 20 copper coins a day, much less half a day. It seemed that the emperor had allocated quite a lot of money this time. His small eyes rolled around. Chapter 77. Why only half a day? 20 copper coins is enough to buy a day's worth of food. Gong Che shook his head. It's almost time for the busy farming season. We can't let the people's houses be abandoned, the governor thought to himself, what a rich fool. Based on his actions, there would be countless people applying for the position. Although he did not agree, he still had to say, the crown prince is benevolent. This humble subject thanks you on behalf of the people of Xing City. Gong Che nodded and instructed the governor to bring people to patrol the two shores as soon as possible. He wanted to see the exact situation and report back. The governor agreed to all of his orders. Gong Che then rubbed the space between his brows and walked back. When he passed by Gong Yimo's small courtyard, he stopped for a long time, but in the end, he still could not take that step. If she was his sister, why did he have to see her so often? A trace of pain flashed across Gong Che's eyes as he returned to his own residence. Gong Yimo was very busy. In her previous life, she had already made explosives. Although it almost killed her, at least she had experience. Now that she was careful, she would not be in danger. It was a pity that, in her previous life, she had used those explosives to kill people. Thus, there were countless people who had died directly and indirectly in her hands. It was no wonder that Gong Che said that she had a vicious heart. Casting aside those superfluous thoughts, Gong Emo began to seriously compare the ingredients. In fact, in this era, the concept of black powder was already present, but it wasn't used much. At most, people used it for alchemy, or as a fire starter, fireworks, and so on. Even if it was used on the battlefield, it would only come in handy during a fire attack. Its lethality wasn't great. However, after being modified by Gong Yimo, these explosives were really worthy of their name. They had terrifying destructive power. After all, the silt and sand in the river had accumulated for many years. If they really relied on manpower to dig, who knew how long it would take? Moreover, if they used explosives to loosen the ground, it would be much easier to dig. Just as she was in full swing, a person quietly walked in and whispered in Gong Yimo's ear. "Princess, there's a letter from the West Province." Gong Yimo's eyes lit up. Gong Dai had finally arrived in the West Province. Why did it take so long? She quickly opened the letter and saw that it was indeed Gong Dai's handwritten letter. After all, he was the child she raised. Gong Yimo did not expect that she would miss him after not seeing him for a while. There was nothing written in the letter. It seemed that Jinshi of Gojoseon had kept it a secret very well. He definitely did not know about what had happened to her. Thinking of Gong Dai's worried face, she giggled until her eyes landed on the last two lines. Only then did his expression become somewhat strange. He wanted to control all the shops in the capital? Did something happen in the West Continent? Was he short of money? At this time, Jinshi of Gojoseon was also shocked. He looked at Gong Dai, speechless. You said you want the indenture contracts of those managers in the capital. He had a strange expression on his face. He had been busy with the disaster relief during this period of time, but when he was free, his grandson brought up this matter, as if he did not trust him. This made him a little sad. Gong Dai sat at the table and looked at him coldly. Grandfather, I just don't want to be deceived by your alliance again. His words made Jinshi of Gojoseon feel slightly embarrassed. This was all the princess's idea. He did not expect that he would be the one to suffer. We were also afraid that it would affect your mood. You should know that returning halfway is a serious crime. You also know that I want to return halfway. Gong Dai lowered his eyes and smiled. Then do you know why I didn't leave? Jinshi of Gojoseon looked at him with a pair of tiger-like eyes, seeming somewhat puzzled. Gong Dai's expression was indifferent, but upon closer inspection, he looked somewhat miserable. I'm so small and useless. Now, I can't even suppress you and royal sister. What can I do if I return? His words made Jinshi of Gojoseon's heart overflow with pity and guilt. He could not help but wonder if his previous actions had hurt this child's self-esteem. Gong Dai laughed self-deprecatingly and looked at him indifferently, but his tone gradually became firm. So these days, I've been thinking about how to not be manipulated. Jinshi of Gojoseon seemed to understand the anger and bitterness in Gong Dai's heart. You can have it, but you'd better tell the princess. Gong Dai raised his teacup and said indifferently, I've already told her. Jinshi of Gojoseon did not know whether to laugh or cry at his words. He was determined to monopolize power. If he wanted to take it, then so be it. After all, these two children had helped him earn a lot of money these 2 years. As he spoke, he asked his wife to take the box containing the indenture. Gong Dai took the box, and his expression changed for a moment. He could not help but smile. It turned out that only those who had a firm grasp of everything in their hands had the right to speak. He raised his head and said to Jinshi of Gojoseon, Grandpa, don't worry. We'll divide the profits the same way we did in the past. From now on, I'll be in your care. Because the depression in his heart had been lifted, his smile was infinitely bright. He was obviously only 11 years old, but he was steady and tenacious, and always took drastic measures to deal with the situation. Western Garrison Liege Lord couldn't help but sigh. His delicate daughter had actually given birth to a child with such a character. He patted Gong Dai's shoulder. All right, then I'll take you to the celebration banquet first. The disaster was already serious, and there was a large-scale outbreak of the epidemic, but you saved the people from disaster as soon as you arrived. The people are all thinking of you. They said they wanted to celebrate with you. You're in the limelight now. You must make good use of this opportunity. Gong Dai nodded obediently. However, in a place where Jinshi of Gojoseon could not see, his gaze was cold and gloomy. The disaster in the Western continent was the first step to making a name for himself. He would make good use of it, and use it thoroughly. By the time Gong Yimo snapped out of her daze, she had not seen Gong Che for more than half a month. The farmers quickly recruited 80,000 people. Gong Yimo felt that there were enough people, so she asked someone to take off the list. They chose an auspicious day to break the ground, and the start of construction was set to be the day after the auspicious day. On the auspicious day, Gong Yimo and the others went to the riverbank of the Yangtze River alone. This was the end of the Yulong Inner Canal, where it met the Yangtze River. As far as the eye could see, the river water was rolling. In ancient times, the water was very clear, and because it was at the intersection, there was plenty of water. It flowed endlessly like thousands of horses galloping. They came here because Gong Yimo said that she wanted to practice the excavation method she had mentioned. Although Gong Che did not know what she had bought along the way, he was not worried that her idea would not work out due to his blind trust in Gong Yimo. However, Li Ku and the others who knew what Gong Yimo had bought were not optimistic. They did not think that the black powder would be of any use. At most, there would be a spark. No, there was so much water here, there would not even be a spark. However, Li Ku looked at Gong Yimo suspiciously. Every time they went out to buy things, Gong Yimo would go alone. In other words, she would mix some other things into the soil. He wondered what the soil would look like after she modified it. Chapter 78. On the other hand, Gong Yimo was brimming with confidence. Her handbag had been placed in her space, and the sandbags in her hands were only for show. In order to make it easier for her to move, she wore her usual white training clothes today. Her hands and feet were tied with black rope, and her hair was tied into a braid that hung behind her head. She looked very fresh and capable. Seeing that Li Ku and the others didn't seem to trust her, she wasn't annoyed. Her slender finger pointed at a small protruding rock in the Yangtze River. Do you see that rock? How long do you think it would take for people to dig it out? That rock was like a small island in the water, surrounded by the waves of the river. It was very difficult to dig it out. Su Yuan said, "It's so big. Even if 10,000 people wanted to dig it out completely, it would take an entire day. After all, it's in the water, and these obstacles have grown solid. It would be too tiring for people to dig it out." Gong Yimo looked at Gong Che. "Brother Crown Prince, what do you think?" Gong Che seemed to be in a daze. When he heard her voice, he casually replied, "This prince thinks that Su Yuan is right." Gong Yimo couldn't help but pout. She finally realized that there was something wrong with the Crown Prince. What exactly was wrong? Why did he suddenly become so strange? At this moment, the 6 of them were standing by the river. The wind was biting cold, and their clothes were flapping. Sensing that Gong Yimo was looking at him, Gong Che couldn't help but turn his face away and look at the lake. His action made Gong Yimo a little sad. She had done so many things for him. Even if something had happened, he shouldn't be ignoring her. Gong Yimo pouted. "Humph, with my method, it'll only take a moment to flatten it." Yu Ziqing laughed. "No way. Just based on those things that make fireworks?" Gong Yimo snorted indignantly. "Just based on those things." The few of them shook their heads one after another. Their faces were full of indulgence. Since the princess wanted to play, they would support her. Otherwise, the little girl would not be able to get off the stage. How boring would that be? Gong Yimo looked at the 4 annoying people and shook their heads. Then, she looked at Gong Che, who seemed to be absent-minded. She snorted in dissatisfaction. Then, she rolled her eyes and said seriously, "However, this method of mine is extremely dangerous. You guys wait here, I'll go alone." Her words finally made Gong Che react. He looked at Gong Yimo. "Very dangerous. Then let someone else go." Seeing her like this, Gong Yimo laughed in her heart, but she refused with righteous words, are other people's lives, not lives. What's more, I know martial arts. Things that are dangerous for others won't be a problem for me. Gong Che still wanted to persuade him, but when he saw the other four looking at him, he didn't say anything in the end. Then be careful. Gong Yimo smiled and nodded. Then, she stepped on the water and left. Her figure was slender and nimble, like a fairy treading on the waves. She landed on the hills in the middle of the lake and smiled at the few youths. Her skills made a few lively people applaud one after another. However, Gong Che looked at her worriedly. Unfortunately, he was too far away and Gong Yimo couldn't see his expression clearly. She waved to the crowd and jumped into the water. Then, she started to find a suitable place to place the bundles. Blasting was also a profound skill. Gong Yimo didn't have any professional knowledge, but she had experience in her previous life. So, she quickly found a suitable spot and placed the 7 bundles that she had prepared. At this moment, the water had reached her waist. After lighting the fire, she quickly jumped into the water and counted in her heart. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. A loud sound. It broke through the sky. The sound was like a sudden clap of thunder. It startled countless birds in the forest on the opposite shore. The people in the distant village also looked up at the sky. Was that sound just now thunder? Gong Che and the rest's ears were buzzing and their expressions were shocked. In the distance, sand and stones filled the sky. Huge rocks were thrown into the river. A small mountain-like obstacle was instantly flattened. This was a power that could shock the world and make ghosts and gods weep. It only existed in legends. For the ancient people who had never seen such a scene, the shock in their hearts was incomparable. Su Yuan's legs trembled and he almost knelt down. This wasn't the power of a human. How could a human be able to flatten a small mountain in an instant? This was the power of a god. This was a miracle. The rest of the people had different expressions. That was their shock. They were all the same. Gong Che stared blankly at the muddy water and the stone mountain that had disappeared. In his heart, for the first time, he felt ashamed of his inferiority. Since he was young, he had always been outstanding in terms of poetry, writing, archery, and national politics. He was also the crown prince of a country. He was second only to one person and above tens of thousands. But even his father, who was known as the Son of Heaven, couldn't flatten a mountain in an instant. In the legends, the first emperor moved mountains to fill the sea. That was just a legend. But she could do it. She could really do things that even the emperor couldn't. Not only that, she was quick-witted, resourceful, and tolerant. Gong Che suddenly found a perfect reason for himself. Such a unique girl, how could he not like her? How could he not like her? Oh my God. Fatty, quickly pinch me. I must be seeing things. Yu Ziqing shouted exaggeratedly. For a long time, there was no response. He turned his head and saw that the biscuit in her mouth had already fallen to the ground. She didn't even realize it. Instead, she unconsciously opened her mouth and looked as if she hadn't recovered from her shock. Impossible. How is this possible? Liku's expression was serious as he kept repeating a few words. Every time Gong Emo went out to buy something, she would only return with a small bag. But they would scour the streets for black powder and almost always buy half a cart full of them. Could it be that just by adding a little something, the black powder that could only be used as fireworks or fire starter in the past would have such a drastic change? This was impossible. This was too miraculous. They were shocked for a long time. After a while, they realized that after the explosion, Gong Yimo hadn't gotten up. Gong Che's expression gradually became anxious. He thought of the earth-shaking explosion and the huge rock that exploded. She was so close. Could it be? Could it be impossible? How was this possible? That was Gong Yimo. How could she fall in his hands? Hey, princess. Where are you? Little Fatty's energetic voice reverberated over the river, but there was no response. At this moment, their expressions became strange. Gong Che's face instantly turned pale. He hurriedly rushed into the water. But the yellow sand in the water was tumbling. He couldn't see anything clearly. Looking up, he couldn't see the end of the river. Su Yuan and the others were also anxious. They quickly ran along the river, shouting her name as they ran. But all they heard was the howling of the wind. There was no sign of her at all. Gong Che's heart was burning with anxiety. He took a few more steps forward. The water gradually reached his thighs, but he didn't notice. Chapter 79. Was she knocked out by the impact of the explosion? Or was she injured by the flying boulder? Or was she not able to escape in time during the explosion and was smashed into pieces? No, impossible. Gong Che's hands continued to splash the water. The water gradually reached his waist. He looked around frantically, but there was only water everywhere. It was all turbid waves. Where was she? Where was she? Princess! Where are you? The shouts from the shore reached Gong Che's ears. They were filled with panic. Gong Che looked at the water surface. He wanted to shout, but his throat seemed to be blocked by something. His eyes were scarlet. Even though the wind tore at his hair, he could not shout a single word. Gong Yimo. You can't die. I won't allow it. I won't allow it. Suddenly, he felt something tugging at his calf. He jerked his head back, only to hear the sound of splashing water. Who else could it be but Gong Emo standing in front of him with a heartless smile? He hugged her fiercely. He hugged her tightly. Gong Emo was caught off guard. She gasped and said, "You must be scared. Who told you to ignore me for so long?" Actually. Before she could finish her sentence, her body was pushed away by a strong force. She fell into the water and choked on a few mouthfuls of muddy water. What the? Are you crazy? Before she could finish her sentence, she heard Gong Che's heart-wrenching shout. Are you crazy? Why did you scare me like this? Why? He clenched his fists tightly and his eyes were bloodshot. He looked like he would go berserk at any moment. Gong Yimo's imposing manner dissipated after he yelled at her. She quickly steadied herself in the water and explained like a little wife, "Actually, I'm not." She wanted to say that she didn't do it on purpose. It was because when she was overturned by the explosion, she was pushed into the middle of the river by the water current. The water plants there were lush and had entangled her feet. Fortunately, she knew a little bit of turtle breathing technique. Otherwise, she would have died here. However, before she could finish her explanation, she was hugged tightly by Gong Che. This time, his tightened arms were trembling. No, Gong Yimo felt that his entire body was trembling. His pleading voice rang in her ears, as if he wasn't the one who had pushed her just now. Don't scare me like this again. I'm scared. I'm really scared. If he never saw her again, if she died in front of him like this, Gong Che would never forgive himself for the rest of his life. Every word that came out of his mouth was just like him, stiff and trembling as he whispered into her ear. Gong Yimo suddenly felt a little guilty. She could feel the overwhelming panic in his heart. He needed her. This made Gong Yimo's heart soften. This was her brother, so she hugged him back and explained softly. I didn't mean to scare you. It's because I was entangled by the water plants. I almost suffocated to death in the lake. When she said that, Gong Che hurriedly pushed her away and examined her carefully. He asked anxiously, "Are you all right? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere?" Gong Yimo shook her head and giggled, "That's great. Crown Prince Gige still cares about me, unlike 2 days ago when he didn't ask about me at all." I thought that I had fallen out of favor. The more she spoke, the more pitiful she looked. She was soaked all over as she peeked at him pitifully. However, after hearing her words, she saw that his expression was both sad and happy. It was extremely complicated. Seeing her acting cute, Gong Che couldn't help but smile in the end. His hand touched her forehead lightly. The deep affection in his eyes was tangible and as gentle as water. "You. How did you fall out of favor? You're the person that I can't forget or let go of even if I die." Hearing him say that, Gong Yimo heaved a sigh of relief. She looked up with sparkling eyes and asked expectantly, "Then will you still ignore me?" Gong Che couldn't help but pull her into his arms again. However, he restrained himself because the others had seen the commotion and were rushing in this direction. "I won't. Never again," he promised. "You forced me. You made me unable to let go of you. You insisted on appearing in front of me and asking me to love you. You didn't leave. Then you're not allowed to leave anymore." Seeing that he had returned to his usual self, Gong Yimo heaved a long sigh of relief. She was scared to death. Just now, she had indeed been entangled by the water plants. However, when she thought about how Gong Che had been neglecting her recently, she was afraid that his favorability towards her had dropped quite a bit. That was why she purposely stayed a little longer before coming out. Moreover, she wanted them to worry a little to pave the way for her performance later. What a tiring act of life. However, she didn't expect Gong Che to be so worried about her, so she felt very guilty. She had really decided to forgive Gong Che and become his sister. She also cherished this family relationship. Fortunately, Gong Che didn't seem to realize that she had done it on purpose. Otherwise, he definitely wouldn't have let her off so easily. It seemed that she had already raised his favorability towards her and it definitely wouldn't drop anymore. Little did she know that her favorability towards her had long been raised to the point that the sibling relationship had directly changed. It was running wildly on another strange path. When the others returned and Gong Yimo was safely carried back to the shore by her brother, they all heaved a sigh of relief. "Princess, I said you shouldn't be so scary. You scared me to death." Su Yuan panted heavily and said breathlessly. Gong Yimo embarrassedly made a face and jumped out of Gong Che's arms. "I'm really sorry. I was caught by the water plants and made you guys worry." Seeing that she had a good attitude in admitting her mistake, everyone stopped talking after a few words. Instead, they excitedly discussed the matter of the LV Na. Yu Ziqing's eyes lit up. "Princess, how did you do it? You must be a deity. Do you know how to cast spells?" Even Li Ke looked at her with a face full of curiosity, as if he wanted to see through her. That kind of earth-shattering power. Was it really done by this little girl in front of them? At this moment, Gong Yimo's expression became serious. She gritted her teeth, took a step forward, and suddenly knelt down. The few of them were shocked. Gong Che hurriedly came over to pull her. "What are you doing?" Looking at Gong Che and the few people in front of her, Gong Yimo didn't move even though she was pulled. Instead, she kowtowed to them. "Everyone, please accept my kowtow. I have a request." When she said that, everyone knew what she was going to say. That powerful LV Na just now, if it wasn't a miracle, then it was an unprecedented weapon. And weapons were what all ambitious people wanted the most. No man could resist this kind of temptation. And Gong Yimo clearly didn't want to hand it over. The others looked at each other. Gong Chei's face was sullen and he didn't say a word. Only Li Kuk shook his head. We can't hide it. If we want to use this to build the canal, then the Emperor will know sooner or later. Even if we don't say it, there will naturally be others who will. Gong Yimo kowtowed again. The sound of her kowtowing seemed to be knocking on everyone's hearts. She had almost died in the water just now. Now, her whole body was soaked and she looked very miserable. Usually, she gave people the feeling that she was omnipotent and very powerful. But now that she was kneeling in front of everyone, they suddenly realized her helplessness. Only then did they remember that she was only a 12-year-old girl. Ordinary girls were still unmarried, but she was already able to help the people of the world. But this didn't change her weak nature. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.